7:05. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk.
Councilor Perry,
Present.
Councilor Hilton,
Present.
Councilor DiMederos,
Present.
Councilor Katz,
Present.
Councilor Coulter,
Present.
Councilor Cook,
Present.
Councilor Driggs,
Present.
all present.
I'm always last.
Great. Again, good evening. It is Monday, June 24th, 2019. We will start with the consent agenda. We have town council minutes from June 3rd, special and executive. The executive were previously approved, so this is a redundant item. We acknowledge receipt of minutes from boards, commissions, and committees. We have 2 sets from our Harbor and Coastal Waters Management Commission. And that is it for that. We also have a report from our treasurer. This is the May budget and revenue reports. And we have various correspondence items. An item from the Smithfield School Department resolution in support of the Safe Schools Act of 2019. That's HB 5762 and SB 636. Attorney Timothy J. Chapman thanking the council for the opportunity to meet and discuss serving as our town solicitor. The Providence City Council resolution regarding single-use plastic bag ban, and the Providence City Council resolution regarding budget cuts to the state payment in lieu of taxes. That's the pilot program. And an item from Mr. Roger Bennis regarding Main Road sidewalks and state TIP. It's the town administrator is handling that. You have an updated document from the town administrator, and this will be set for a regular agenda item on Monday, July 8th, if you can believe it. July is almost here. And finally, approval of tax assessor abatements. Are there any items to be removed for further consideration? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as proposed?
So moved.
And
Second.
second. All those in favor? Very well, thank you. We proceed now, wearing our hats as a licensing board. Mr. Brian J. Ferguson from Swansea, Massachusetts, requesting approval of a special event license, antique show and sale at Meeting House grounds. That would be at 28 East Road on July 4th, Independence Day 2019, from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., as always, subject to meeting all legal requirements. Any questions or comments on this request for a special event license?
Is he here?
Would the applicant like any free advertising if he is here?
Is he here?
Would anybody from the public wish to be heard on this? Any, all good?
I have a
Last time I
question.
thought a license would sail through. I'm not taking it for granted, so.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Did the police chief look at this, and will there be a need for a
Yes,
deed?
he was going, he's not completed yet, but he was going to the police department.
Yeah, because sometimes down at Four Corners, we
I
require
haven't got the response.
a detail because of the traffic.
I'll have it before he's able to.
So if the police chief recommends it, it'll be meeting.
So I just want to make note that it was brought to my attention that in the code, it says you need to apply 14 days before these licenses. I'm still standing with the position that that is to allow the clerk's office the time to get this on an agenda. Because oftentimes, the agenda is like 4 days before. This person applied June 17th.
Which is 14.
So July 4th would be 14
Yeah.
days. But it's 14 days prior to a town council meeting. I think this is, can they waive this?
Yeah, I don't think don't we usually just go 14 from when the application comes in?
Well, we do. The idea is for businesses, we try to get them on the next available.
Mm-hmm.
But since there's been some issues with licensing, I just want you to note that it was brought to my attention. Councilor Driggs had read the code part of it. I don't.
Councilor DiMederos, your code actually says that it has to be 14 days prior to the event and 14 days prior to the council meeting at which is considered. So there's a double
Yeah, I
requirement
don't
in
think
there,
we've ever,
which is fine, but if you're going to ignore that, you should do it pursuant to 5130, which is the waiver provision. I just would
Right.
suggest that any motion include proactive language that you are waiving it, as you're allowed to do.
Can I, and I believe this person there's been many years he has been here for
This is
this.
an annual.
Yes,
It's an annual
Nancy.
event of many, many years, so I have no trouble waiving.
How
So,
about we get this one through? What do you say, everybody?
yeah, I just want to make sure, so if the police chief said there should be a detail there, there will be, and
Yeah.
that'll be meeting all
Every
legal
year
requirements.
he's-
I'll make a motion, we approve with the police chief's recommendation.
Second.
And with the waiver
With
of
the
the time
waiver.
provision pursuant to 5130.
Exactly, with the waiver.
That's what you said, Counsel.
Yep, exactly. Took the words right out of my mouth.
Just so we're clear, does the second also include explicit reference to the waiver?
Yeah, Trish, yes.
Yes.
Very well. Any further questions or comments? Any objection to proceeding directly to a vote? Hearing none, all those in favor? Okay, unanimous. Thank you.
May I ask a question? This number 4,
That is number 4, but it really
it's really what?
Okay, 9H, that's the one we were looking for.
Oh, okay.
Let me see.
Well, no
Because it
wrong.
wasn't in the consent agenda under, it says 4,
is.
but I couldn't find it. Okay.
Some of them we
Never
bought,
mind.
and we changed the number on them, that should be 9.
Just trying to see if you're paying
What are we
attention.
talking
Because we
about?
kept changing the agenda, because we did it a little late. and-
Okay.
and
All right.
changed.
You're just testing us, that's all.
Now I understand, thank you.
Item 4F. It's actually item 9H.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Very good, Gio.
4F became 9H, I think.
Yep,
Okay.
So this is now 9H.
Yes. I was handed it around.
We have a few appointments and resignations matter. Is the first, we do have a resignation pending from Patricia Cody. From our planning board, we'll be looking for a motion to accept with regret and appreciation. May I have a motion, please?
I'll make that motion to accept Patricia Cody's resignation as of June 30th. It says 209, but I'm sure it means 2019, with regret and with appreciation for all her service. Being on the planning board is a very difficult job, as I said, like I've said before, and we want to thank Patricia for her endless amount of time that she spent doing this.
I'll second it.
Yeah, the planning board is a lot of work. Hopefully they get a stipend. Am I going to get an open meeting complaint over the wrong year? Are we all okay
Well,
with this?
this is another, she met 2019 at 201.
Is it BC?
I make no promises as to whether or not we'll get an open meeting.
All right. Fair enough. Well, in all seriousness, thank you again for all your service to the town, and hopefully you'll take a little break and come on back. May I have let's vote on that motion. All those in favor? Thank you.
Mr. President, before we leave that, I just wanted to note that if my count is correct, that leaves us with 6 on the planning board, which has a quorum of 5. We should probably at some point take a look at what we can do to make this more attractive to people to
It's-
volunteer for.
It's due to be advertised because there are others with terms that are coming up for July, so it'll have to be advertised.
If you're interested in the planning board, don't hesitate to apply. I think the Charter Review Commission, didn't we try to reduce the size
Yes,
of that from 9
to
to 7?
7.
I think I might be
Um,
interested.
All right, we have, speaking of vacancies, we do have 2 vacancies on our Open Space and Land Preservation Board, with 2 vacancies expiring April 15th, 2022. We have a reappointment opportunity for Mr. Brian Janes, who I believe has been serving for some 20 years or so. Obviously well qualified. I think we can proceed directly to an appointment unless there's any objection.
I just have a question. We need to waive our policy because it says we take a week, we interview and then appoint a week from now. So in that motion, we need to say because there's only 1 person and 2 vacancies, we usually waive. Is that okay? Okay.
Any objection to doing so? All right,
Did you
may I
make a
have a
motion?
motion?
I'll make a motion to reappoint Brian Janes to the Open Space and Land Preservation Commission for a term to expire April 15th, 2022, waiving the policy of waiting until the next meeting.
Second.
Okay, thank you very much. All those in favor? Great, thank you. And we have this is a new appointment for the Tree Commission. We have a vacancy expiring on April 15th, 2023. Constance Fleckenstein? This is a request for a new appointment. Guess we should do an interview?
I think she's here.
She is, she's right over there.
I saw her. Oh, there she is behind the post.
I was gonna say, I thought you were, but that was on the Conservation Commission committee, so you know, that's,
May I ask?
this is a new appointment to the Tree Commission? Go ahead.
I've been on it for the last 2 years.
On the
It just
tree
hasn't
commission.
been official.
Oh, okay. I was wondering if we had well.
You've been on it without being appointed. so
Hang
you've
on
been
a second. Connie, have you been the Conservation Commission member on the Tree Commission, correct?
Yeah, that's how I got on the tree commission.
Right, but are you continuing to do that?
Yeah,
So you don't really.
I don't know
need-
that we need to appoint you technically. By the way, in case you didn't know, Connie is the mother of the community orchard that we have over at the Tiverton Public Library, which has really been quite a wonderful thing. But I don't know if technically we,
Peter appointed me.
Well, they have to have somebody from there on the tree commission, so
Yeah.
they put you there. So I don't particularly know if we do have to appoint this.
I mean, I think you're a member, but I think you're a member because the Conservation Commission chose you to be
okay.
the member.
So let's make it official.
It's great to see you. Do you have anything you'd like to tell us about
Not really.
Wait, you still want to do
I
it?
thought you already had the job.
Well, I
So-
did.
So I
But it
think,
wasn't official.
Okay,
Can
but I
I have
think
a
it is
question?
official.
okay.
So, the tree commission is separate from the conservation commission.
Right, but
And as I understand it, Connie's the representative from the conservation to work with the tree commission, but is she looking for an appointment to the tree? That's what I'm confused about.
And can you only be on one board, right?
Well, we have
she's
separate
on, no,
meetings.
but she's already on it.
You have separate meetings.
Yeah.
But I
right.
think she's a member, I believe that Connie's a vote as the Conservation Commission
They have a representative.
designee, whatever you want to call it, to the Tree Commission, that she's a voting member of the Tree Commission
She's like a
by
liaison.
virtue of being on the Conservation Commission.
So I just had to look this up, but according to the code, the Director of Public Works and the designated member from the Conservation Commission are ex officio and voting members of the Tree Commission.
Yes.
So there's 3 members plus 2 ex officio, 5-member commission, of which the appointee serves. The tree warden is also a non-voting member.
Yeah.
So
So
there's 6 technically.
congratulations, Connie, is still.
You're still
You're
there.
Well, do you want to
Gio,
take a vote
did
to
you say-
acknowledge the ex officio status, or,
I don't think we have
we
to.
don't really have plaques or
all right.
scrolls or
But thank you
anything.
for the apple orchard.
That's right. Well, I just, thought I should be officially on the tree.
Is she a voting
But you are
member?
official, you are officially on the Tree
And
Commission.
it got you out of the house tonight. See that?
That's right.
One vacancy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So in
thank
addition
you.
to your role, we still
And-
have another vacancy, is that for the tree commission?
True.
See Ray Fougere.
And if you
the
haven't
tree
seen
guy.
Connie's, and if you haven't seen Connie's community orchard at the library, I suggest you do. It's really a wonderful thing that she's done.
Can I just, Nancy made a good point, which is that if she cared to be appointed as a member other than through the Conservation Commission, she could, and then that commission could appoint somebody else.
Right,
If
that's
we
what I
need
was-
to find more members for the tree commission, that would be one way to do that.
It's kind of weird, but yeah.
Well, why don't we'll hold on that, and if someone
Maybe
makes the
someone else
request,
would
then
know.
we'll do just that. That's a great suggestion, thank you. Okay, so the minutes will acknowledge the ex officio status and no other action taken, okay? Fair enough? Okay. At this rate, we're moving right along. General business, Attorney Mark Russo, Twin River, Tiverton, request scheduling process for an amendment to Chapter 22, Article 3. These are hours of operation for the casino gaming facility within the Casino Gaming and Entertainment Overlay District, CGE, to consider 24-hour ordinance beyond the pilot term. One of the longer agenda item requests. Do you want to briefly just introduce yourself and warm us up to the request, and we'll go from there? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. And the air conditioning feels good, by the way.
I'm surprised it's working.
Do you feel it better? Feel
do.
it? But we don't over here
Very
yet.
nice out there.
Okay.
So when we approached casino operations, one of the important things to do was to establish a public safety plan. When we worked with the public safety officials and the council to do that, there was a public version, and then there had to be a final confidential version, because there's some things in a safety plan you don't want out in the public. So we met with the council in executive session, finalized that. That was necessary for the host community agreement. It's still part of the host community agreement. Then we approached the council on the concept of being able to operate for 24 hours. And the council enacted an ordinance that allowed us to do so on a one-year pilot basis while we saw the public safety protocol in action. So we began operating, as you know, in September. We met with the administrator and public safety officials probably, 3 or 4 times in September, and ironed out different things. And the protocol has worked, and we're now at a point where it probably makes sense to start to think about scheduling the various hearings and public hearings. And obviously, you're going to want to get reports from police and fire. You're not going to want to take it from us that it's working and find out from them, but at least to start that process, because we received an interim license under the pilot right at the beginning of operations, and I think the decision was made in conjunction with the clerk's office to have the 24-hour entertainment be in conjunction with the liquor license. So that was heard in November. So there's a November to November license, but it probably doesn't behoove any of us to wait till the absolute last minute. So I talked with the solicitor and thought it might be a good idea just to get on the agenda to talk about a scheduling process. I roughed out an ordinance draft. Obviously, it's for you to review, but at least to start the discussion and hopefully get something scheduled by way of hearings and that type of thing, so that we're not, going up to the last minute.
Mr. President? Of course, I was present during all of this. The only thing, and I don't know if it makes much of a difference, but we were supposed to be getting quarterly reports, and I don't think the town council, and it's in the agreement, that the quarterly reports shall be provided to the town council. Now, I don't remember receiving any quarterly reports, and I just was wondering, are there quarterly reports that were given to someone?
Well, the public safety officials get daily reports, and there's a software system, I think, don't hold me, I think it's called IMC, or I think it's IMC, but they can produce those reports.
Right.
But I don't know if quarterly reports came to the council. I don't know.
No, they haven't, and in the agreement was that and I remember a long discussion about this, and we said, just let us know quarterly how it was going. Now, of course, no news is good news. So I assume that things have been going well, because we haven't received any complaints, but it was in the agreement to get the quarterly report. So, like, if we could get something in writing, how things have gone over the year, if there was anything that was noticed a problem.
When you say the agreement, it's in the ordinance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in it that we do get quarterly reports.
Can I ask, so I understand, if we have to look at this language, I'm not sure I understand what that language in the ordinance means. I saw that in there, but I didn't know if that was
Well,
sort
it was-
of a X number of incidents, or if it was something narrative, or what was
Yeah, it
the
was
desire?
something more like narrative, and we talked in depth about this, was just tell us how it's going every 3 months, and if there's any problems, we could take care of them before it becomes a real issue in a year. Like I said, no news was good news, but we really haven't received the quarterly reports.
And that's just on the sort of public safety front, or
was on-
operations generally?
It was general, but it was definitely public safety, but general,
I mean, I think the idea was that we would be able to understand, kind of the number of incidents, the kinds of incidents, the impact that we were seeing on police or fire response, things like that. It was,
Any complaints, because it's open 24 hours, because there was a lot of audience participation, and they were concerned over the noise going 24 hours.
Mark,
That kind of stuff.
does that software allow you to go back and retroactively create those reports?
Yeah. You can
do
look
that
at
for us?
all the reports, all the incidents that report on a daily basis.
Could you-
And I just, as the counselor said, I'm assuming that no news is good, because the idea was, if there were issues, that the council would have a hand in modifying or updating the plan. In other words, if you had a specific issue, say there's some event on a Friday night that's causing a problem, okay, we want to amend the public safety plan to say that on Friday nights, you've got to do something different. We just haven't had that. But you can go back and look at all the data.
My suggestion, because I would recommend to the council that they move this right ahead. I think
Yep.
that the ordinance needs to, I don't want to see it fall behind, given the operation. But I would recommend also that you provide those retroactive reports in the next few days if possible, so that we can see
Before
what
the
they look
hearing.
like in case the council has any opinion onto what they should look like, as to what they should look like. I'd like the council to see a model of the report.
Well, we receive monthly incident reports from police and fire
Right.
that break out the casino arrests.
I do,
incidents
I absolutely
separately.
agree with that, but it's in the ordinance that they were supposed to, like, if they changed any.
I guess my thought is that if you're already getting that information from police and fire, perhaps that's language you would strike from the ordinance when you take the opportunity to amend it. But if there's something not in there, then maybe you would specify in the ordinance what exactly they would provide you, just so that there's no lack of clarity.
I'll be really honest, we get a lot of reports and we get a lot of police reports, and I suspected that if there was any incidents, we'd get that separately, because sometimes with the amount of paper we have, you can look at it, but to actually pinpoint what was the casino may be a problem.
Can you remind me that this,
But it's in it's in here, that's what I'm saying, it was never.
it also says something about hearings as to the reports? Was there a one-time hearing 60 days after the pilot? Or, we're technically in the pilot still, right?
Right. There's supposed to be a public hearing at the conclusion of the
Yeah.
pilot, so you can decide whether or not you want to extend it. That's why I'm here.
That's what this
Or
is.
change some things.
Okay, got it. And then, so what it says in line 13 of page 2, the quarterly reports and the hearings thereon, it seems to contemplate hearings on the quarterly reports unless I'm...
Yeah, I think if problems were flagged in a quarterly report, then the council would have the option of having a hearing on that, so if we needed to modify the public safety plan.
Okay.
Could we just get something that says no problems, and then we can at least tell the public that we've looked at that, like, I've talked about that, or whatever.
I definitely think you
Okay.
should get a report from
Right.
police and fire, yes, and
Okay.
we'll help assist with that.
We've already gotten that, haven't we?
Good evening. Yep.
So as the Vice President pointed out, as part of the monthly reports from the police department, we
Yeah.
break out the casino incidents.
Yeah.
As far as any outstanding or notable incidents, we can definitely do something, and I can report that to the administrator with the fire chief. But I can stand here and tell you that, we've definitely seen an increase in incidents. We're definitely there. We're there 24 hours a day. We recently moved from having 4 officers a day, meeting 1 officer from 8 a.m. to midnight and 2 from midnight to 8, and we've moved down more in conformance with the host agreement that we have 1 officer there 24 hours a day.
This was what the report was supposed to be. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like
So
to...
that's all.
I'd encourage, I don't want you to write a report, but I think something more than raw data. I think it does need some management commentary. I don't know that I wouldn't spend more than an hour or 2 on it, but I think we need a little more than just raw data.
And the same thing
just to be
from the
faithful to
fire,
ordinance.
how many guys are there every night and that kind of.
Is there any other sort of specific categories that this team would like to see comments on as it considers the protocol?
If I may, communication has been an issue, and I'll let the former active fire chief talk about that too. We're working with the casino, and they're working with us, but during the casino's been open 9 months. Our plan was to wait until September, which would be the 12-month date, and kind of look at a 12-month period of incidents, arrests, response times, so you'd have that proper data. That was our plan. But I know communication has been a struggle. The casino and the casino security personnel have been working with us, but I'll also let the acting fire chief speak to that we're trying to do a better job in keeping in communication with our public safety personnel that are assigned to the casino. And that it has been a struggle.
This is what I wanted to hear, if there was any struggle.
Is there any objection to the concept of a sort of a narrative summary report that would add management commentary to the raw data?
Thank you.
Okay. And if something strikes you of a topic that you want to, I think you can always ask the town administrator.
As far as the fire department goes, the only concern that I had was, like Chief Jones just said, is the communications. But the casino certainly has been working with us. We've met with them. They got their radio guy on it, and we're trying to figure it out right now, so.
So if I understand the process, you've come with a draft ordinance, perfect, so I think it kicks to you for review, formal review.
I've already formally reviewed it.
Okay.
But I assume, Mark, this is the version that I looked at.
Just want to make sure I understand the ordinance process exactly, because I viewed it as a three-step process. It comes to us, then it goes to the solicitor for 7 days, and it comes back to us to consider scheduling for a formal hearing. Are you suggesting we can collapse steps 1 and 2?
I think you can put this down for hearing at your next
We have to advertise it for a specific amount.
May,
next
Let's make
opportunity.
sure we're all on the same page.
I'd actually, I understand the need to get this done before the expiration of the pilot period, obviously. But I would really like to get through a summer with the casino, because we haven't been through a summer with the casino, and it's different. It's a different time of year. We may have more tourists. We don't really know. I would prefer to schedule a hearing for this in September, so we've been through a summer time period, just to see if something crops up in the summer months that, you don't see in the fall or the spring or the dead of winter.
We
That's
could actually do it end of August.
Deadline is
that would be my preference.
We're currently licensed until into November, yes.
Yeah, November 30th.
So maybe mid-September or something.
You could, but I also would remind you that this is there is still a licensing process in place after you've made this change. This simply eliminates the pilot process, just like any bar or restaurant or casino that would have a license. If there are problems in a certain season or whatever that may be, you have the ability to call that licensee in and take them to task and potentially revoke a license, over incidents. So that doesn't change.
That's a tougher standard, right?
Sure.
The decision.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I'm not sure we're changing the standards here. It's just that this was an attempt to give you a chance to look back and consider things broadly, but in the end, this is just a license.
Right, but it's the 24-hour that we put as a pilot. It's not the license. It was the 24-hour vote was a pilot, and to see if there was any problems. So I don't know if that makes any difference legally, but it was the 24-hour. It wasn't their
Well,
license.
I guess what I'm suggesting is that if the remedy is that you would not renew the 24-hour, then you're right. But if the remedy is something else, like a typical restaurant would be sanctioned, then that's not going to change. You'll still have the ability to enforce it like any license.
I also want to point out to the council that when this ordinance was put together, it has specific language in it, separate from our licenses, that if we violate the host community agreement, we violate any of our licenses, we get called before this board on the 24, not this board, but the council acting as the licensing board on the 24 hour.
Yeah.
So there are safety nets that we just can't say, oh, we have a license, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think you guys said the standard was less strenuous. It's actually more strenuous given the way the host agreement was prepared.
So we have a contractual, we sort of layered in an extra layer of protection contractually on top of the regular licensing regime. Is it?
Something like that.
Yeah.
But,
President,
oh, go ahead.
What I'd suggest is, since we would request that we have the quarterly report for the next meeting, at which point maybe we schedule a hearing on the quarterly report as implied by the ordinance, and then at that time, we'll be farther along in the summer, and I mean, we've got a lot of play here, so that would keep the ball rolling, but actually start to cover some of the bases
Yeah.
that appears we haven't been
By that
covering.
time, we're almost at the end of August, really, or mid-August, because we,
And does this have any relevance to the litigation that we're going to be talking about at the end of July, or is this sort of a totally separate issue?
I don't believe so.
No, it will be separate.
That's a whole other ballgame. Okay.
I would also.
Good point.
I would also like to point out that, just me as an individual counselor, when we had the public hearing for this, it was a very contentious thing. There were a lot of people who really did not want to see 24-hour operation, and then there were people who were. And in part, this was a compromise that we would do a pilot for a year, and we would see how it went, and we would see what adjustments needed to be made. It doesn't sound like things are, not going well, but, I made a commitment to the people that we would have a pilot for a year. I understand this has to be renewed before the end. So I'd be more comfortable, me personally, sticking with what I voted for originally, which was to see it through, pretty close to a year's time frame and decide whether or not there need to be any adjustments made.
I understand, Counselor, and let me just add one more point, though. One of the reasons I asked when Attorney Russo and I first talked, I suggested that he move more promptly on this because of the growing list of potential ordinance changes that the council has considered or is considering, not just the comp plan conformance, but other ordinances. So I don't want to see them in particular get tied up in a busy season of ordinances. I know that's going to be a tough thing to schedule on the agenda for the council in quarters 3 and 4. What one compromise there might be that you could hold the public hearing. I don't believe there's a requirement that you have the final vote immediately afterwards. You could hold that final vote for some time, but the public hearing, which may again be contentious or at least well attended, you may want to make sure that gets scheduled more promptly. But that's just my recommendation.
Well, if the Vice President's suggestion is adopted, it may not be an issue because the pilot itself was actually adopted in August. So you had September 1, well, I forget, late August was the soft opening. So if you followed that schedule and we were here for public hearing, let's say in August, then you still would have a year of track record under your belt and some summertime activity too.
It was at the end of August we did this, right before you opened, I think.
Yeah, it was, yeah, right.
I'd say too, if we expect a lot of discussion and debate, in some ways, earlier might be better to have multiple opportunities so that we're not out of time. So are we agreed on a game plan there?
Repeat the game plan.
So we're going to get
It's been
the,
too
well,
many.
Justin, why don't you?
So we will request for our next meeting the quarterly report with some narrative explanation of any problems or questions or challenges they faced. We'll have, at that point, we'll schedule a hearing on the quarterly report, just so people can have that first opportunity to comment. And then at that time, depending where we are, we'll schedule the hearing for
Which will be the end of
the
August.
ordinance change.
Which will be the end of August, really, or the mid-August.
And that gives the hearing in September, which is 2.
August 26th, you have it held?
Right, 'cause I mean, we keep booking other things in between after the meeting.
Sounds good.
I just want to make sure, it's a detail, but it's an important one, because we're looking at a lot of ordinance changes. Do we have consensus on the view that if the solicitor has pre-reviewed a draft ordinance, that steps 1 and 2 collapse? I just want to make sure, because I guess we're not taking that vote tonight then, because we're delaying the decision on whether to set for public hearing. So we don't have to actually answer my question tonight, but can we keep thinking about that? Because I'm a little nervous about it. I just want to make sure we're all squeaky clean on the ordinance change process, so.
I will double check
Okay.
and get back to the council on that process.
Well, I know, I just want to make sure everybody else is on the same view on this. So maybe just take a look at that in your own study and we'll review it as it comes back up. Is that fair? Okay.
Sounds good.
Because normally we don't have a draft ordinance in place, so normally there's a concept and then we have to go from there. So, anything we missed? Do you want the last word or anything, or?
I was just going to ask a question. Is it for us to participate in the quarterly report, should we coordinate that through the administrator's office? I see him nodding, so.
Yeah, I think it's co-authored, or at least it originates with you. I suggest you take the first draft, and then they can do an endorsement commentary on it, or.
Oh, okay, sure.
I mean, it says
Yeah.
Twin River, Tiverton, and Tiverton public safety officials. I think necessarily has to include the administrator.
I'll coordinate
Yeah,
with John's
yeah.
office.
I definitely think it should reflect your input, not just the administrators.
Understood.
Okay.
I would just like to apologize for not being on top of this and not remembering that we needed these quarterly reports. That was my responsibility.
You have a lot going on for a town of 16,000 people.
That's true, too.
Which is why you like the job, so.
Oh, love it.
Okay.
Thank you
so
very much.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Perry, let's talk about landfill closures.
Yes,
Transfer stations.
I'm just trying to get something going here because don't know if the landfill's going to close next year or when it's going to close. Haven't really got a set date. And I just think that we got to start looking into, are we going to have a transfer station? If we are, where? And start the ball rolling instead of waiting till the last minute and then it dumped on us and we're scrambling. So I'm just trying to see if we can get something going. I don't know if Rick, the DPW director,
Could I maybe start,
Good.
please?
Sure.
So I think the first thing that actually needs to happen is that public meeting or hearing on where we're going with the solid waste management in terms of the trash being trucked to the landfill or not. There's been discussion of it. There never has been an official policy decision by the council based on some sort of public hearing. I think that needs to happen ASAP, and I would ask that the council schedule that at your earliest convenience. Secondly, in terms of actually preparing for the closure and for the design and hopefully construction of, more likely than not, a smaller transfer station, which is another part of the policy decision that needs to be made by the council. We did ask Power Engineering to update the report it had done, but then we wanted to narrow down the scope so that they're not just going to do the whole report all over again, which would be a very expensive undertaking, but to focus on the cost estimate of a smaller transfer station for the recyclables and bulk items, things like that. I think we got an initial proposal. We thought it was a little high, and Rick has been talking with them about bringing that down, and he can give an update on where that stands. Finally, the search for a site has not progressed sufficiently, I think. We don't really have, several sites have been proposed, several have been sort of rejected as not really being viable for an operation of this nature. We keep looking. So the one site that will be evaluated for sure is the DPW site. Different people have different ideas as to whether that's actually a good site. We do need to find at least one other site to compare it to, and there will be some sort of analysis in terms of site suitability, traffic analysis, and what have you. I did forget one other thing. Sorry, Rick. The latest from Power Engineering, based on the measurements they've taken of elevation, is that we're still looking at certainly closing in 2020, possibly in the summer, maybe in November. That's the latest that we've gotten. And it all depends on how much trash we generate.
Thank you. Good evening. Jan covered most of the bases. Thank you for that. The elevation is something certainly of concern to us. And one thing we are leaning towards, myself, I'm leaning towards quarterly elevations instead of semi-annually, so we're more aware of where we stand. That, unfortunately, because the budget started quite a while ago, is not budgeted for. That might cost another $7,000 to $8,000, according to PAR. The other facet is that we have found by reviewing the records that the trash intake changes substantially. It goes up and down. In 2016, I don't remember the numbers exactly, then it might have been 12,000 cubic yards, then it went down to 9,000, then it went up to 14,800. So it's very hard to predict what the trash level will be. And since DEM has set a height limit, that is going to determine when you have to stop taking trash, or November 2020, whichever comes first. So we are working with PAR on that. Another, and as Jan mentioned, many sites were discussed for the transfer station, and technically, we'd probably be going to, again, it's going to be based on the policy determination by the town council after the public hearing, but probably go to a recycling center, not a technically called transfer station, because the only trash you would get would be incidental trash to people bringing in items that, excuse me, that are then hauled off-site, but not to Johnston landfill. If you take trash in and then take it to Johnston, that would be a transfer station. But the proposal so far is simply to truck the daily trash to Johnston instead of taking it, as we do now, to the Tiverton landfill. That reduces the cost of the center. At some point in the future, we may want to go to a full transfer station, but for the time being, based on the 2011 PAR review, that wasn't really economically viable at this time. As far as the permits go, those are all still in progress. DEM is satisfied with the progress we're making, but it goes back and forth between PAR and DEM, and they add items. That's for the RIPDs, the operating license renewal, and the closure permit. Another site that was considered that PAR would look at, if the council so deems it worth looking at, is the one at the corner of Progress Way and Industrial Way. Some people are not really fond of that because it would be taking land away from the industrial park, but the counter to that is it's something the town owns now. But then again, the counter to that is, well, we would lose the money that we would make selling that. So that aspect is still up in the air. We've looked at various sites, some initially just Dick Hart, who's a member of the landfill committee, has chatted with people, and for instance, off of Boogamosh, 8 Rod Way, but the person later on decided they really didn't want that. We looked at sites on Fish Road, but the person wasn't interested in selling that quite a while ago. Other sites that seem viable for distance off of Boogamosh Road, unfortunately, there's land, but they're in a residential district. So the hiccup is finding a spot that's zoned correctly or having to get a variance, and economically viable, and transit is one of the big factors.
Is it possible to use the landfill for a transfer station?
DM will not allow that,
okay.
Unfortunately. They will allow certain things, solar, recreation, but not a
Couldn't use it
transfer
for a
station.
okay.
But, thank you, Joe.
So the next step is...
Rob.
Go ahead.
Well, it's kind of to that point. Maybe we should have a workshop with everyone involved before we have a public hearing and kind of get some kind of plan and then bring that plan to the public. Because right now, we really don't have a real good plan to bring to the public. And I was thinking maybe have a workshop with the landfill committee, the town council, DBW, and whoever else Jan feels we should, PAR Engineering or whoever else we need, and then have the workshop, and then formulate a plan, and then have a public hearing.
In July 1st, the fiscal year 2020, we were approved, not as much as we wanted, but we were approved some funds for PAR to continue update the study on a smaller scale, as John said. So starting July 1st, we could progress with that.
Maybe a workshop schedule.
So, because I am the council representative on the landfill committee, the one thing that the committee is really struggling with, and we may need PAR to help us with, it's one thing for us to identify various pieces of property. It's another thing for any of us to know from an engineering point of view whether or not that property is going to work. Because it doesn't necessarily have to be a flat site based on how a recycling center works, but it's really difficult for us as a committee to evaluate, this site would work without a lot of site work versus something that would be like, okay, you own this, but the amount of site work is going to be, that's really something we need PAR to help us identify.
Well, do you recommend that we have that report updated before we do a workshop or a public hearing? Or is that an ongoing update that you just spoke of?
Well, if the council has a few sites they would like looked at, 2 or 3, we could do that within the budget. But because the budget, and I'm not complaining, but because the budget is low, we really could probably only find out viability on 2, maybe 3 sites. They do minimal traffic review, land, not a professional survey, but a land survey, review the DEM, excuse me, the DEM requirements for a recycling center, rough costs to construct the area based on where you choose, and rough costs for designing such a recycle center. So a workshop prior to, if people can pick out a couple of sites, is a good idea, so PAR can go forward.
Rick, is there a minimum amount of size that
Yes.
you need to?
Yeah, people have different opinions. I have a strong opinion that you want to size it so that if in the future you want to do a composting area, if in the future you want to do a transfer station, if you find the transportation costs start to exceed construction costs, you want to size large enough to be able to handle that. I would say the minimum of that would be 8, 9 acres.
Just speaking for myself, it seems to me that this has to happen within about a year. So if we had to take that vote tonight, it would be the industrial park. Unless somebody else can, just speaking for myself, unless somebody can prove a case for something else. I mean, I don't think we're going to be exercising any eminent domain or anything. We'd have to find a place that's not owned by the town, negotiate a deal, make sure it conforms with all the land use restrictions. So again, that's just to put a finer point on it. I think that has to be one of the choices, because we can't assume any other choices by it. Is that too wild of an assertion?
No, except that we have to look at that land, just because the industrial park land is not ideal, like with rock and stone and everything else that goes on there. So we have to make sure that we can do it there.
Right.
Yeah.
And that comment was made the last time when we actually talked about the dog park in the same location, that we do need to look at the zoning.
Yeah, because it's a tough area.
And I try to set my biases aside and just look fair-mindedly, which I believe I do. If the DPW site is chosen, then DPW is going to need some storage space somewhere else for all that we accumulate. So I'm not against temporarily saying if push comes to shove, that we have to do a recycle center there, but it's not a long-term solution unless DPW has some other land somewhere else.
There was a discussion, this was a long time ago, but, and I might be wrong, it was land near the police station, but more near that complex where the pizza place is and all of that. There's an area in there.
Yes.
Is that what you're talking, do you
Yeah.
remember? And that seemed very viable, the flatness and everything there, and the accessibility. Now, has anyone looked at that area?
If you're talking about that sort of laneway between, where it goes by
This was a long
the
time ago, but
church
yes, yes.
and Sherman Oil,
Yes.
that was looked at briefly, but again, that would have to be something PAR would look at, because there seems to be a lot of wetlands there.
All right.
But that's just visual.
I thought they were also going to use that for
Well,
a second exit for the
Well, I
industrial
just
park.
know that, no, because of the wetlands. I
No,
think that was out of the question.
I think what you're remembering is there's some land that's owned by the North Tiverton Water District.
Yes.
And
Oh,
we
that
had,
area? Yeah.
we had at one point approached North Tiverton about a possible trade or swap or some such
Yeah.
thing, but they were not particularly interested in that.
But we
So-
might want to pursue that again, because that was an area that everyone liked, if we could get that area.
The site location would be nice because it's close to the highway.
And that was what they said.
Yeah.
Okay, so game plan. Thanks for bringing this up. Workshop, any objection from management on going directly to a workshop? Okay. So do you want to line that up, or you want to try to set this up now? What do you want to do?
I have no objection to trying to set it up right now.
The workshop,
It's sort of like a preliminary hearing,
Yeah,
right?
with
It's a-
everybody.
people can speak, right?
Oh, yeah.
Can we have a presentation of some kind, and we can project and actually show sites and have that prepared? So we can at that location, get the public sense of what we want to do and where.
Yeah, I can certainly look into that. I'll have to find somebody with that kind of capability. DPW has nobody in
We could help.
that PowerPoint type of capability.
But
I
I'm
think-
sure we can find somebody.
I think,
Landfill.
I think the public should be welcome to come and speak, but I also think there's a lot of information that the council needs to learn first about exactly how much all of this is going to cost. It's not just about finding the land and building recycling, which we need, but then there are going to be the tipping fees for going to Johnston. We've got other issues with recycling loads being rejected. So I think there's a lot of information that the council needs to hear first, and public should be welcome to speak, but the first workshop might really be focused on just getting all of us really up to speed on the big picture of this and trying to come up with a plan that we can present to the public.
I
Would you like-
disagree with that in as much as I would put the public's feedback on the same level as all those other considerations, not as the second thing we consider after that. So doing it all at once with the public, part of what I would want to get out of a workshop or hearing is, what do people want to do? Like, how far were you willing to go to drop off trash? But
I do agree with that, but I think we are so basic right now, we don't really have a plan to present to the public. They can certainly come and give their opinion, but we're not at the point at all where,
The plan could include options.
right.
What was that?
The plan could include
Include
options.
options.
Yes.
And the public could
Right.
indicate.
Right.
But we have to discuss what the options are, and it's very, very rough right now, right?
So-
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to, I was not implying that I think that the public's opinion is secondary or not, of paramount importance. I just don't even know that we all have enough information to be able to present to them in a cohesive way what the various options are and what they might cost.
Yep.
Okay, so who owns this, other than us, the subject, Mr. Administrator? Who on your team do you view owns? Is it DPW, is it the commission?
Well, it's probably DPW and I will be helping. We need to work pretty closely with Power Engineering to be able to prepare for this. I think, given what we still need in terms of an update on the study to get some of the information that you want, it's going to be at least a month before we are ready to do it. So it's just scheduling something in the second half of July.
About July 29th, it's a Monday night, we don't have a meeting that
That's the fifth
night.
Monday.
Well, yeah.
Is that comfortable for staff?
Yeah,
Very comfortable.
The 29th is fine for
July 29th.
Might be out of town that day, but it's okay.
I might be out of town too, so that's.
But we'll have a lot of attendees.
There's actually a note in my calendar that hold for council workshop.
Yeah, the fifth
I
Monday.
know
Okay.
that, but-
All right. So
Yeah, I haven't been here too.
that- pencil that in, and then, did we answer, Justin, are you satisfied? Do you want an agenda? Do you want to talk more about the agenda? What do you want
I
to do
think
for
they
that?
should set the.
See what you come back with, and we'll go from there? Is that good?
yeah, I think
Okay.
we present it, try to get some feedback from the public, and
Okay.
then we can narrow in for a more specific review and hearing.
Great.
And it may not matter, but what would you like to call this? A council workshop, a public workshop?
Council workshop.
Second.
Okay,
What
what
do
do
we
you
call it, a
think?
council workshop?
Landfill extravaganza.
Council, public,
Can it be
whatever.
like a landfill con? Is that-
well, I think if somebody from the public had some ideas, it should be
Yeah,
allowed
I
to.
guarantee, what's that, public comment? I don't care what you
Absolutely.
call it.
How about if I call it landfill workshop?
No, I would call it town council workshop. I think
So-
Is it going to be here?
that's the way it should be advertised.
What's the
I
date?
think so, unless you want it in the high school. I don't know that we're going to
We
get.
have bigger space
That
on there,
many.
we should call this workshop. Madam Clerk, would you have an idea? We'll figure it out.
Let's figure it out.
Just do it, yes.
Let's just not run out of room at the landfill before we give it a name.
7 PM, right? 7 PM?
7, is this enough room though? Do we need more room
What
than
date,
here?
what date are we talking about?
29th, July 29th.
Yeah, we might have to go somewhere else, right? Because if
We'll
we're
figure that
gonna
out.
bring in,
We can do the library if you want.
Library?
Well, the senior
yeah, library
center
or the
is a-
senior center, or
that's a
something
big
like
one,
that,
too.
Yeah.
right? Because you're gonna need
Tables.
more tables for people to gather committee, right? Bringing in the trash, landfill committee.
But yes, we'd want the recycle
Right.
landfill committee there, yes.
So we're probably gonna need it.
They've been working really hard on this, and we need to hear what
Yes.
they have to
Always
say.
meet at the landfill.
There you go.
Somewhere with air conditioning.
Okay, we'll figure all that out. Thank you for any support along the way, let us know.
Okay.
And,
Thank you all.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
Glad you're on it.
Are you guys cool out there?
All right, that was, it's looking like Monday, July 29th.
Yep.
You own 10 acres of land and you'd like to donate it to the town for the future transfer station.
Take 8.
We will give you a plaque for that. Fine plaque. Can we condition the casino license on the, I'm just kidding. All right, Chief Jones, we have some special reserve officers to approve. Considering Kenneth Cabral, Joshua Mello, and Edward Savigny. What I do is I get every name wrong
Ed Savigny.
so that I don't appear to be discriminating.
It's not Jones, that's for sure. So,
Do you want to introduce?
good evening. As part of our continuing expansion of the Reserve Officer and the Special Officer Program, former Sergeant Ken Cabral was a member of the Tiverton Police Department for 20 years. He's retired, and he's asked to come back as a reserve officer. The other two gentlemen, Mr. Mello and Mr. Savigny, would be designated special officers. What we've been working on with the administrator in the police department is having a community service officer program. So what the purpose of that is to have people with law enforcement experience or people who are interested in law enforcement come forward, and the difference between the special officer and the reserve officer essentially is a firearm and powers of arrest. So with the special officers, we could utilize them for traffic, town functions, for added security, and also the enforcement of town ordinance violations, where the reserve officer would be the same powers and duties of a normal full-time police officer, but all of these folks working under under my direction, but with your approval, and they're not permanent employees of the town.
So they would do detail, well, the special would do detail?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So that would just come out of our detail account? Oh.
If they could work for a vendor, then the vendor would pay for them,
That's
just
what I'm
like they do
saying,
for your
just
police
like they
officers
do
now. Correct.
Okay.
Of course, the special officers can call in for assistance if they needed any of those powers.
They'd have a radio, yes.
A whistle.
Does anybody from the public wish to be heard on this request?
So lovely idea.
Lovely idea. Any questions or comments from the council?
Are they here? Should we interview people?
I'll make a motion, we appoint the following individuals: Ken Cabral, Josh Mello, and Ed Savigny as
Sorry.
CSO officers.
We have an omnibus motion to appoint all three in one motion. Any further questions or comments?
Are they all here?
Just Mr. Mello is here. You can stand up, Mr. Mello.
Josh.
Mr. Mello,
He used to be on the budget.
Yes, you did.
He was on the budget
He's a budget
committee. He was on the
right?
budget committee, yeah.
And he was a Middletown police officer.
Yes.
All right. Any objection to proceeding to a vote? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Director Rogers is back at the mic. Requesting permission to hire a temporary worker for landfill operations. We should have just took those together. I apologize.
No problem. Okay, basically, one of our employees, the landfill attendant, is out on extended medical leave. On June 4th, he informed us that his doctor said he had to take 4 to 6 weeks off. However, he's going through different tests. He received results of one of those tests just today, he let us know. So it looks like he's going to be out longer than 4 to 6 weeks, and without revealing any private information. Again, it's going to depend on some tests that he has to go through later on. So we're looking to hire somebody temporarily as a landfill attendant. And again, as noted in the revised submission to the council, he would be a town employee. He would be paid at the rate of $27 per hour. He would receive no benefits. The work days would be Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday for 8 hours a day. The temporary high rate, for instance, for the winter DPW plow truck drivers is $30 an hour, but they're hired with a 1099. In this case, the town would be paying the employer deductions. The payroll would come from account 5530-5101, the landfill payroll. And this account has sufficient funds to cover this expense for 2019 and 2020 because the employee is out on weekly accident and sick disability funds, which is run by the Teamsters. So funds do not come out of the town. So while he is out, his position would be funded temporarily to the temporary employee. And it is noted that overtime rates would be avoided on Saturday because we would not have to fill it with a Monday through Friday person.
If I can add one other thing, that it should be a W-2 employee rather than independent contract was at the advice of Labor Council.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Is he an independent contractor, or is he going to be? Okay.
Yes.
Any questions or comments? Questions or comments from the public? Floor is open.
I'd like to make a motion to allow permission for the DPW Director Rogers to hire temporary workers for the landfill operation.
I second it.
Objection to proceeding directly to a vote? Hearing none. All those in favor? Approved as requested, W-2 employee.
Will he be starting right away?
We would hope so, yes. Thank you.
Okay, next up, we are, I'd love to take the budget transfers out of order. Is there any objection to knocking out the fire chief's requests first? Oh, yeah, and the DP. Next time we have a department head, let's try to take all their, is there any objection to taking item F out of order? All right, hearing none, let's call that acclaimed. Director Rogers, let's do your budget request real quick, okay?
Sure.
Thank you.
There's a reason we're skipping the solicitor. I know you want to see everybody leave the room before you do it. But
We're going to knock out the budget requests, and we'll be back to that item in 5 minutes, okay? It's out of courtesy to our staff. Mr. Rogers.
Yes. Thank you. I would request approval of the budget transfers as listed for dozer repairs in the amount of $3,500 from sick leave. All the items to the left obviously have some excess, and there's a need for the ones listed on the right. Landfill equipment, rentals, and cover has some excess, and we have a need to increase the engineering and testing permits fund by the $14,400. That's basically because of the extras required by DEM for the operating and closure permit process. For instance, $8,000 was needed just for lab tests, and then there's also the review and the processing of the extras. The snow removal account had some extra in it, and we're looking to transfer $24,000 of that. And the reason for that is, one of the reasons is we would like to get rid of the pony motors that are on the old snowplow trucks. That's a separate motor, and it's just much more maintenance. And you can't even get parts for those anymore because they're approximately 27, 28, 29 years old. So we'd like to convert those to a pump system run by, it's not a PTO, but it's like a PTO. It runs off a pulley, and that would run the conveyors and the spinners. It's more reliable, and you don't have to have two fuel sources and two basic motors. It would run off the existing drive engine. And the other one is because the sweeper conked out, and we have had that trucked via CN Wood to Schmidt. They were going to give us an estimate, but Offhand, they said you're looking at $15,000 to $25,000 for that repair, because long ago, evidently, the air filter was put on improperly, and it appears that that's what caused some engine damage. So that's why we're requesting the $24,000. It's not going to be enough to cover both these items, but it'll help. And then we're looking for the director's salary. I was under the impression way back when we transferred some money out of that, more than that amount, but that it was based on a pay date, not actual work days. Therefore, I shorted it by $2,200. The overtime is asked to be increased by $1,400, uniforms by $600, and that's all funded by the account 5101, which is personnel services. And the last items totaling $4,600, because sand, salt, and gravel is in the red by $700, heat by $600, miscellaneous supplies by $900, landfill uniforms by $100, and landfill gas, fuel, and tires by $2,300.
Supplies is 900, not 90.
Yes, $900.
Any questions or comments on any of these? I think we did have a question on the potential engine damage. Do you have, I don't know who or when or how, but do you have some kind of corrective action plan or training program or something to keep that from happening again?
Well,
yeah, I had that.
Luckily for the current staff, that air filter was put on prior to their hire. We don't know why it was put on incorrectly, and until Schmidt gets back to us, we don't even know conclusively if that's what caused it. But by intaking particles into the engine, it appears that caused some damage. And we have definitely been looking at improved ways to do preventive maintenance.
Do you want maybe a follow-up on that at some point? Is that okay?
Sure.
I don't know that it needs to come on the agenda, but maybe in a weekly report or something, unless somebody wants it on the agenda. Okay. Any other questions on these, or can we approve these in an omnibus motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I'm going to do them all together, if that's okay. I'd like to make a motion to take account number 5540, 5150 sick leave to account number 5530, 7645 land dozer repairs for $3,500. Account number 5530, 6442 land equipment rent/cover to account 5530, 7131, 39 engineering test permits for $14,400. Is this all right, Nancy?
I think Nancy was just asking, and I think that you could probably just ask that they be approved as
listed.
presented, although I would note that we have two corrections, I believe, in the way they are listed, so I would make those corrections. Might save you some reading.
I'd like to make a motion to approve these transfers as listed. One of the corrections would be E, 5540, 7423, supplies for $900. And what was the other correction?
I think that may have been the only one.
That was it, right? Okay.
Second.
Any objection proceeding to a vote? Questions or comments from the public? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Thank you again.
Is Rick done now?
Okay, we just have one other item, and then every other item on the agenda is sponsored either by somebody that's at this table or a treasurer who's an elected official. So I'd like to take the fire department's approval request, and then we'll go back to the regular order of business, okay?
Thank you.
Hi, Bruce.
Hello.
It's a formidable duo.
Moral support.
I kind
Can we say no to this?
Yep, one, he is still here, thank God. And I'm doing this because he obviously hasn't been involved in the process or this current year's budget, so. And I love this part of the job, so I figured I'd come up one more time.
He can't stand this.
Okay, so we're looking at $3,500 to move from radio maintenance to personnel and protective gear, $32,000 from personnel to apparatus maintenance, and a few items on personnel, holiday pay, longevity, and overtime. Maybe just something quick on the apparatus to be maintained, if it could.
Yep, that's going to be for the Rescue 3, or actually Rescue 1, what we're going to call Rescue 3 now. That's going to be the reserve.
That's the old
That's the 2012, that's the one that had the motor replaced. Basically, the whole suspension had to be rebuilt, brakes, etc. It's gonna last us, that's gonna be a reserve rescue, that's gonna last us quite a while.
The other one's gone, right? What was it, an 08? The 08's gone?
The 08 is at Highway right now.
So
Yeah,
it's gone.
it's off of, yes, correct. Correct.
The new one's here.
On the road.
Yeah.
The new one's here.
Yeah.
On the
The new
road.
one is here, running
I
well.
saw it the other day.
Yes,
Spent a lot
absolutely.
of time on that. We did.
So we have a 2019, 19.
Correct.
16,
And
2016, those are our two front run.
And then we have the 12.
12 is the reserve, correct.
Good.
Yep. And I promise you, this will be the last time that I come up here and ask for a money transfer.
Oh, don't do that.
So
It'll be
you,
cheap
so
now.
you say now.
It might be him.
Remember, you're on tape.
Don't tease us. Don't tease us.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to approve the requested budget transfers for the fire department as listed on the June 24th agenda, item F1.
Second.
Okay, we have an omnibus motion to approve all 6 transfers as requested. Any questions or comments from the public? Objection proceeding to a vote? Hearing none. All those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll return to our regular order. Next up is the selection and appointment of our town solicitor, which may include terms of engagement.
Mr. President.
By way of,
Oh, sorry.
I'll just quickly say, by way of review, our prior town solicitor submitted a resignation, and I think that was submitted, I think even before we had our first meeting. Might have
Yes.
it. And we appointed an interim solicitor. We had one applicant, Mr. Ciccone, who was appointed in December for a 6-month term. 6 months has already come and gone. And now we've had 4 applicants. We interviewed all 4 of them over the span of 2 meetings. I think all 4 were quite impressive, I think I can say. And now we have to make a decision. So,
Sorry, either way, I just was going to suggest that since this concerns possible reappointment or appointment of my office, unless you have a need for me to answer any legal questions at this point, I would, if it's okay with the council, step away from the table while you have this debate, just to offer the appearance of not influencing that
don't
decision.
forget to come back.
Rob.
We'll see.
Rob,
Yes, ma'am.
at this point, I'd like to make a motion to table this item until we go into executive later this evening. I'd like to talk about all 4 candidates, and we usually do that, and of course, this is a new council, so if that's the way this council doesn't want to do it, that's fine. But usually we go into the executive, we list our top people, and we discuss it, and any concerns that we might have about different candidates. So that's my motion.
Second.
Because we haven't really discussed any of the candidates, and I just think we should.
I don't know, I think it can be in public. They came in front of us and told us everything.
Well, I know, but there's certain things I'd like to discuss about performance that I think should be done in executive.
I think it can be done in open session.
Well, there's a motion.
As a matter of, I'm not convinced that the Rhode Island General Law 4546 5A1 covers discussion of applicants for a job, and to the extent it covers the job performance of a current employee, that employee would have had to have been noticed and given an opportunity to have that discussion in open session, and I don't know
Right, and that current employee is our town solicitor, and he, as far as I'm concerned, was notified when this agenda was made. But we have done this in the past. We have put it under this. Would be the third time I believe that I've been involved in it, and it's not had any question on whether or not this is the way we should do it. But like I said, it is my motion, and if this council majority doesn't approve, I'm not going to argue with it.
I would like to say that we've been advised in the past that when hiring somebody that reports to the town council, such as the solicitor or the town administrator, that a discussion under personnel can be had in executive session so that people can feel free to ask about potential references, things they've heard, things they may have heard about someone's character, and that is perfectly allowable under Rhode Island law. We've done it many times. I don't think that I don't think that in fairness to applicants that you necessarily have all of that discussion in public. And I do think it's worthwhile for us to be able to share our thoughts on which candidates we think are the strongest and which candidates we may have concerns of. What we may or may not know about their references or other information that we're aware of.
I guess I have a pretty strong view on this, that I actually think that the law does not allow for that, and if it did, I would want to know if we gave notice to all 4 applicants, and I think any one of the 4 would have the opportunity to force the conversation out into the open.
Well, I have a question.
Because they're not employees.
I have a question. All 4 we're going to be discussing in the open. Have we talked to all 4?
But the agenda says discussion of interviews of legal services, which presumes to me that it's more than one person. But aside from that, I don't even know why we would not want to be transparent and have that conversation in the open. And I recall appointing a lawyer when I was on the council last time. We made that decision out in the open. And when you appointed your special counsel, I don't recall you going in an executive session to make that. Maybe you did. I don't know.
Did, in fact,
but
go
it's
into
not
executive session.
But it's not the decision. The decision has to be made in public. The decision has to be. But if we want to talk about specific references or specific things that concern us, and they are our future personnel, I've been told by 2 different lawyers previously that is the way I had to do it if you were going to discuss delicate issues. And that's just what I'm proposing. I mean, obviously, if the majority doesn't agree with me, it's not going to go through. So there's a motion on the table.
Who are the lawyers, Denise? Who are they?
Well, I did this with Andy Tights, and I've done this with Tony. I've been here for 8 years. I've interviewed other lawyers, and this is the way that we've done it. All I'm saying is, usually we already know the references, we discuss the references. I don't know if anyone has looked into any of these people's references. Usually that's the way it works. I was president last time. I asked for the top 3 candidates. I looked into all the references, and then we met in executive, talked about what people told me about these 3 candidates, and that's how we went on. We've had no real discussion among the 7 of us. It's on here for a vote, and that's fine, but that's the way it usually works, where we discuss references, previous performances, and I don't think that should be done in public, and I've been advised that it shouldn't be done in public. But if this is a different way we're going to do it, that's fine. The motion's just on the table.
Okay, we have a live motion on the table. The motion is to table this agenda item. And I'd like to know if there's any further questions or comments or debate from the council.
Just a quick check as we're looking at this. Items 1 and 2 in the executive session on the agenda are under 45, 46, but the Open Meetings Act is 42, 46. Does that matter?
The other 2 isn't advertised correctly, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Items 1 and 2.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
3 people that aren't personnel can be under personnel. Should be 45.
So you're saying, it says 45, 46, 5.
Yeah, 45, 46 is soil erosion and sediment control, which I guess metaphorically it could apply, but
So which means we can't discuss 1 or 2 because they were advertised properly?
I don't know if typos like that are allowable.
All of it. How about this one too? 40?
There's a
42, 46 is correct.
Well, it's 45, and it should be 42.
Oh, that's definitely,
I think that's enough. I think it has,
All right.
But in any event, we can have the vote and it may be a moot point.
Well, the other concern is that I don't know that the agenda is a discussion of interviews. That is different than appointment of a solicitor, right?
Well, the appointment has to happen in public. I
Right.
mean, the actual appointment, the vote to appoint somebody must happen in public.
the vote has to happen in public. You
think
can't vote in
too
executive.
much is done in secret.
It's not secret, it's just that maybe, you know, I'm also protecting the 4 candidates that may not want to have this discussion.
But their interviews were in public, right? I mean, we didn't take the interviews in private, which could have, under your theory, we could have done that.
No, we couldn't have done that. We had to do that in public. This is usually the process by now. We have talked to their references. We get some idea on who these people are, and we discuss it in executive before we appoint. Now, of course, we know Geo, but the usual process was to get the references, discuss them in executive, because you all might have a favorite, and we look at the references, and they weren't good. But at this point, we don't even know what the references have said, or if any of these people have been spoken to. Of course, if your plan is to appoint Geo, then we didn't need to do that, but I mean, I think we needed to do that if we were going to consider the other 3.
I mean, that's what it actually sort of seems like, is that the other 3 actually haven't been considered at all.
Because we didn't even look at the references.
I can speak for yourself. I don't know who you've considered or which references people have contacted, but.
Well, has
Okay,
anybody
well,
contacted any references?
I think, I mean, I cannot possibly imagine a theory that says we have to conduct interviews in the open, but we somehow can conduct discussion of those interviews and reference checks in private. Just, that doesn't make any sense to me. I think this should be an open, transparent debate. Obviously, we're not going to ask anybody about their health records, that type of stuff. So use discretion like we do with tough topics every day. So.
Rob, suppose we liked somebody and I called and got a really bad reference on them. I don't think that I can say what this person said in public. I really don't. I
Well, the
think there would
person
be a
gave
problem.
you, the person
Right,
gave
but
that person as a
I think
reference.
professionally, we shouldn't be talking about that in public. I think it's something we talk about in executive. It's fine. You, obviously,
Okay, is there any
it's going to
other-
fail,
Did you have
so.
a chance to, does anybody else want to be heard on this?
Now, I'm looking at 42, 46.5, and it says unequivocally that persons affected shall have been notified in advance in writing. So I don't think we could go in there and discuss.
But they're not personnel.
They're not personnel, they're
But
not,
don't work for
they're
the
not
point is- The point
employees.
is, the citation that allows us to go out of public view says any discussions of the job performance, character, or physical or mental health of a person or persons.
Yeah, where does it say employees only?
Yeah, it doesn't say employees only. And those people affected shall have been notified in advance in writing and advised that they may require that the discussion be held at an open meeting.
But you're
Nancy,
talking about,
Nancy.
the qualifier there is job performance. That the job performance, meaning somebody whose job you are evaluating. When if you're not an employee, you're a candidate for a position. I mean, you guys are.
Do whatever you want.
We
No,
should
no,
just move,
character is not qualified.
we should
It
just.
says job
You know.
performance,
Okay.
character, or physical or mental health of a person. So anybody we were going to talk about their character, or physical, or mental health would have to be notified, and then we could go into executive session.
All right, like, this isn't even worth it. I put this knowing it was going to fail, to tell you the truth, everyone.
notice a
I just
firm.
did it because I wanted to prove a point that we are not vetting the other candidates, and we're not talking about other I don't know what this is, what's going to happen here. I'm not going to argue it. I actually knew it wasn't going to pass. I just put it here to say what my opinion is. So we can just vote.
You put a motion on the
Move
table.
the question.
Well, I knew that I was going to, everything that I do suggest, I hit an argument. And I knew I just put it here because this is how I felt it should be. But if we're going to just keep arguing this and then it's not going to be voted in, I'd rather just move the motion and go forward.
Okay, is there any objection to proceeding to a vote?
Nope.
All right, the vote is a motion to table discussion of item E, which is the selection and appointment of the town solicitor, including terms of engagement. If this motion passes, then the discussion of the selection and appointment will be tabled. All those in favor of the motion to table? Are there any opposed to the motion to table? If the motion to table does not pass, the floor is open on the selection and appointment of the town solicitor, including terms of engagement.
Try, Denise.
So, how are you approaching this?
It's an open floor. It's just that simple. So if we can have open discussion, which maybe this is the time to have this kind of a discussion that we just had.
Okay.
I don't think we should talk about the physical or mental health of anybody.
So, I'll go first. In my mind, I thought all of them presented well. I think the Attorney Craven sort of eliminated himself from the job that was advertised, saying that he was really just available for land use. And frankly, I couldn't see where he'd have the time to do much else. He seemed to be pretty busy. I did talk to two of the references for Timothy Chapman, and they both, I talked to Russo and Almond, and they both had nice things to say about him. I was very honest that one of my concerns with him was that he was a sole practitioner, that he had given a firm as a backup if there was a gap. But I had concerns about that because I just, first of all, I wasn't sure that the backup would be somebody I would have picked. And secondly, I also wasn't really sure how that would work with a sole practitioner if something should happen and he really was unavailable or couldn't be here for a while. I just don't know how much the Conley firm would have been up to date in what's going on and be able to step in with full knowledge of what's going on. So that's my issue with him. And interestingly, the other person, and I don't know how to say his name. How do you say it?
I think it's
Marcel.
Marcello.
Yeah, Marcello. I again had the feeling that he is potentially could be, sounded like he was pretty busy and was in court a lot. And frankly, I just didn't think anybody, for me, distinctly said this person should change what I feel has been a satisfactory and good relationship with the attorney that we do have now, who did come in temporarily. He's now aware of the issues that are in the town. I think he's been doing a good job. I think, I feel that he's been very even-handed. Sometimes he goes against us, sometimes he goes against somebody else. I think he's been very even-handed. And I would like to, my vote would be to keep Gio going. I think he's done a good job, and I think he does have a firm behind him that's a good firm and that has been proven to be available. So that is what I would do.
Can I ask you to comment? I was just, I reached the same conclusion pretty quickly on the litigator, and I think he'd be an excellent candidate to remain on our special counsel list. He only does litigation. And I had narrowed it to 2, including Marcel as well. And frankly, I was struggling with that decision for some time. Can you just elaborate, and particularly on can somebody remind me of what the fee proposals were? Because am I wrong in saying that Geo is the only one that actually would agree to the retainer cap?
I don't think there was any fee mentioned in this stuff with Geo, right? Because I had asked, and he said it would be the same, right?
Right.
Okay.
The others were straight hourly.
Michael was here.
Chapman was the cheapest.
Yeah, Chapman was the
He was
cheapest.
125.
And I have Marcella right here.
Hourly rate for Marcella was $175.
Is it capped?
No.
Or is it all?
No,
No.
200.
And I asked him
No.
about that. He said
It's 200.
He said it was an hourly rate, and if you calculate it out, you're talking 15, depending which of his employees are here, 15 to 20 hours a week, which doesn't seem satisfactory number, in as much as our current solicitor said some weeks it's up to 40. So, and plus, Mr. Marcello's firm is currently, one of my concerns with them is they're currently acting as solicitor in East Providence, which is in the process of changing their entire structure of government, which can be probably a complicating thing to walk people through. So I'm not confident that they quite understood the availability that we'd be looking for.
The other thing I found interesting with Marcello was that he went through, he was the solicitor for Coventry. And when they, not too long ago, and when they went through a town council change of membership, and the majority wanted to bring in their own person, he was not chosen to stay on.
It doesn't say that in his legal experience, so it doesn't say anything about Coventry.
I believe it does.
Well, unless I'm reading this wrong.
Worcester.
No,
Not Worcester.
No, it's East Providence and Woonsocket.
Woonsocket, I'm sorry,
All right.
Woonsocket, Woonsocket. And he was let go because the majority wanted the person they wanted.
You checked a couple of these references?
Would you mind if I?
Yeah, open floor.
I looked at all of them, and I personally, my number one choice would be Michael Masello. I think he has experience as a town solicitor. I think that his other experience in government was, he was a former rep. I just think that he had a lot of experience, and I thought that he was someone that I thought would be number one. As far as Gio, I was very honest during his interview, and I'll remain to be honest. I don't feel that Gio represents me, and I don't feel he represents the entire council. He disagreed with me, which he had every right to, but I just feel that there's certain of us that he's not as open to. Like I said, I tried to contact him a couple of times and never returned my phone call. And I feel that every time I do suggest something or disagree with him, he totally disagrees with me without listening. And that's how I feel. I also feel that Gio's zoning experience is very limited. We're running into a lot of zoning issues, and I'm not sure that his firm is really well equipped for that. I know that, I think it was Chapman that just wanted zoning. Now, in the past, we've had
Mr.
a town
Craven.
solicitor.
Mr. Craven, it was
Sorry,
Craven, just,
In the past, we've had a town solicitor and a separate zoning official, a zoning solicitor, and I thought that maybe that might be kind of a compromise where Craven could do our zoning, and then we hire a separate town solicitor.
Wasn't Mr. Craven just litigation, or did I?
No.
just zoning. He
Yeah,
specializes
he's
in
also
zoning.
zoning,
Yes.
so I thought that we could go back to the way we used to do it and have a separate zoning attorney, and zoning takes a lot of time from a town solicitor. And it wasn't until recently that we changed that, because when we interviewed Tony DeSisto, we found that he was very experienced in both, so we decided to hire him for both. But I thought that Craven was also someone that we should look at as a zoning person, a zoning solicitor, because he has a lot of experience in zoning. And he also has an associate that would be here to help him. And I thought that might be somewhat of a compromise if we had two separate, and like you said, Rob, like have a different attorney to do different jobs. And so that is my opinion. I could elaborate, but I think that that's all I'll say for now.
Well, responding to that consideration, during the interview, Mr. Ciccione did say it would be appropriate and part of his thought to shift some emphasis towards zoning, and there's nothing in the contract or the agreement that under which he's working now, or that I presume we would have with our next solicitor, that would preclude utilizing other outside firms if that looked necessary and if the council were to call on something like that. So I don't know that we necessarily have to split the appointment in order to get that same outcome.
Well, I just thought that, let's face it, our town problems really keep the town solicitor very busy. And if we had, and we do have a lot of zoning issues, we not only have zoning issues, but we have a department that's in total chaos right now with new people starting, positions not being filled. And I just thought that, maybe it might be advantageous to have a separate solicitor that could just concentrate on that for now. It's just an idea. We did it in the past. It worked very well in the past. We had two separate ones.
The open floor.
Mr. President, I would also agree that I felt that Mr. Marcello was the strongest candidate, particularly with the depth of municipal experience that he has. I think that municipal law is absolutely a specialty, and I felt that his experience, his background, the time that he served as a municipal solicitor would serve us well. I did speak with one of his references, as well as a colleague from East Providence, and received very good recommendations, and he would absolutely be my number one candidate. As far as Mr. Ciccione's reappointment, I go back to Mr. Ciccione's original appointment, and again, Mr. Ciccione has come here without any municipal experience, and frankly, I think that shows. As far as the comment that Councilor Driggs made a few moments ago about sole practitioners, one of the things that we were somewhat promised in hiring Mr. Ciccione is that we were hiring the firm of Cameron and Middleman, and we would have access to all of these resources. And frankly, I've never seen anybody else from Cameron and Middleman here. And as a matter of fact, we have a gentleman by the name of Matt Fabish, who has been subcontracted, I think. I don't even know how he gets paid. I don't know if we're paying him directly or if he's subcontracted through Cameron and Middleman, who's now handling our land use and our zoning. And other than some experience he had many years ago when he was on the planning board, he's not a land use attorney. So I don't really feel that the sort of resources that we were promised from Cameron and Middleman have materialized. The land use and zoning thing bothers me particularly. I am very, very worried about it. That is a really particular specialty in municipal law. You can make a tremendous mess of unintended consequences if you really, don't know how to do that. And it worries me. Again, Mr. Fabish is now being referred to as our assistant solicitor. I don't remember appointing Mr. Fabish as our assistant solicitor. And I also would agree that I don't necessarily feel that Mr. Ciccione's view of his position is consistent with how I see a town solicitor. To me, the town solicitor is there first and foremost to protect the town from liability, and secondly, to advise the council to operate in accordance with all the laws and all the rules and regulations. As Mr. Ciccione said in his interview, you know, he's kind of a political junkie. And I think that that's a bit of a problem. And I feel it as an individual counselor because I feel that Mr. Ciccione works hard to move forward the agenda of the majority. But, and while that may be somewhat normal, it shouldn't be the first and foremost priority. And I find myself in the position of feeling very uncomfortable about having to make decisions and rely on Mr. Ciccione's advice. Again, I think it's in part inexperience with municipal law, but I think it's also a preference to advance an agenda as opposed to protecting the town from liability. And I see that for myself because I frankly went and looked at the legal bills and was rather stupefied to see the sorts of activities Mr. Ciccione has been undertaking since he arrived that I don't know a thing about as a counselor. I had no idea. And that makes me feel incredibly uncomfortable. I do think that that while I understand that you have the majority, and you know, and I may be on the other end of a lot of 4-3 votes, at the same time, I can live with that, but I want to know that the person who's advising me is advising me in the best interest of the town, not necessarily the best interest of the majority's agenda. And again, when I checked Mr. Marcello's references, when I talked to people about him being on a split council, what I got over and over again was that he's a straight shooter, he calls it like he sees it, he calls balls and strikes, and that, you know, he's committed to protecting the interests of the town. I think that that particular characteristic, plus his municipal experience, makes him my first choice for the job.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Mr. Marcello was my first choice, but I also was looking at Mr. Craven's experience on zoning and looking at a way if we could do the two-lawyer thing, if that was possible. But I did like Mr. Craven's experience with zoning, which I think is very important.
But I recall Mr. Craven saying that he's so busy that actually he kept pointing to his associate to take care of everything.
Right, but he
That's
also
what I
had
remember.
experience and he can use.
That he had absolutely no time.
Oh.
He said it. He outright said he had no time.
Right.
And that my
He had
associate would take care of it.
No time for solicitor, but he said he had time for zoning. And when he wasn't able, he had his associate that would step in. But he did say he was interested in zoning.
Yep.
And I think that's a real important issue in this town, especially with the way things have been going.
Well, I also would like to know, Counselor Tricia, what you mean by my agenda. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that.
We don't have the time for that.
This might be a surprise to you, but at least for me, I rarely get back up. I am often presented with things at the last minute. There are things that appear on the agenda positioned in a way that, you know, I find somewhat surprising. I do believe that there is and you can go and look at the legal bills. There's a whole slew of discussions that Mr. Ciccione has had with
Council, as he puts.
counselors that involve everything from charter changes and special meetings,
Special
change
meeting.
charters and all kinds, that I don't know anything about. I mean,
And he actually built for it, so I wouldn't imagine he's making it up.
so when I see, when I, no, it's under.
No,
it-
no,
yeah.
he sends itemized bills, exactly
So-
what he's done.
But it's not cost, I just want to make sure we're clear on
So-
that.
Oh, no.
So when I,
Right.
so when I see all these legal topics that the solicitor is working on, that I have no idea about, have never heard about, we've never discussed at a council meeting, clearly, these are agenda items that that, I'm not privy to.
And I agree, because I looked at the bills too, and there was stuff I didn't even know. Like, I didn't even know we were considering that he discusses with counselors, he puts. And I'm sure it's not for review, because then that would be another open meetings violation. But I do think that he's having discussions with counselors, it's appearing on the agenda, or he's working on things that we don't even know he's working on. Within 2 weeks after he was appointed, he was working on a special charter election, he put it. I don't know the exact wording, but he was talking to counselors. And we had no idea, and I've never really seen that before. Usually, when you talk to an attorney about something, that appears as an item, and you sponsor that item, and you discuss it in the open.
So one thing I would say, and I feel like I've said this several times, is what we don't have in place, and then I really would like to put in place as soon as we have a permanent solicitor, is a legal services utilization policy, because I actually got a phone call, I think from maybe the first day from our labor counsel, who wanted clarity from me on what are the rules here? Do I take calls from anybody? Do I take calls from this? I said, you take call from anybody on the council. We don't have a formal policy. If it looks like it's going to become costly, then I'd like a heads up so that we can talk about that. So this concept of who we take calls from, and and the same thing on the staff side, I thought we've had some discussion about this. On the staff side, we request me to go through the town administrator, this type of thing. That is definitely going to be, I'm going to sponsor having clarity on that as a policy matter as soon as that comes up. So I want to at least put that out there on the table. So
Where are you, Rob?
well, I try to talk somewhat near the end, but did everybody get a shot at? Did you get a chance to actually speak?
But I just wanted to,
I mean, I do have some strong feelings, but
I did much the same thought exercise as Councilor Driggs. Attorney Craven only wanted a portion of the job. Attorney Marcello, as I already said, his billing rates don't add up, I don't think, to the hours that we need, and I'm not confident that he has the time given East Providence. And he also alluded to carrying an assistant through for a little bit to show him the ropes, and then kind of pulling back a bit. And Attorney Chapman, I agreed that the sole practitioner portion is of concern to me, with a backup that maybe wouldn't be involved all that much. And at the same time, I've thought that Attorney Ciccione's activities have been very transparent. I think that shows in the billing. When he has a conversation with somebody, he puts it down under what he's charging for under a retainer, which doesn't change in amount. And I think a lot of the arguments and disagreements we've been able to have been because of transparency, not because of something being hidden. With regard to the assistant solicitor, that's within the agreement. It says any attorney working on behalf of the solicitor's office shall be called an assistant solicitor. So there's no duplicity there. And at the same time, I have some disagreements about the value of a municipal law versus Tiverton law. And we've already had a solicitor who's gotten over 6 months of the learning curve. And I do think if you review the record, there are times, even in the last meeting, where if we were driving the solicitor to come up with answers we liked, he's told me things in open session. No, I don't think that would work. You can't do that. And he's done that to all of us. Just because the opinions have been expressed about agendas, I'll say my view of a comparison on a scale is that the prior solicitor was much more favorable to a particular agenda, and I think we're doing well. And you don't bump somebody just because and start fresh. That said, I do agree zoning is a particular area we need to look at, but I don't necessarily agree that bringing an entirely separate attorney for that role at this time is the appropriate response. We can set expectations for our solicitor, and if we need other help, or even outside of his firm, we can certainly push for that at that time. So I'll just go ahead and move to appoint Gio Ciccioni and Cameron Middleman as our full-time solicitor, with the expectation that the administrator will work out the details of the agreement. Is that the way it would go?
Your question is, question of procedure on the actual contract?
Yeah.
This is just a suggestion, but my suggestion would be to make the appointment, see where that goes, and then I don't know that we would want to wordsmith the contract at this meeting, but we could. But I like your idea of kicking it off to the administrator to...
Well, don't.
Whose role would it be? I mean, I know when Attorney DeSisto was appointed, the council said the administrator will work out the terms of the agreement. It never happened. He ended up working on the terms of his application.
Well, he worked with the administrator, and that's what they decided. They did talk about it.
Right, but it was never
So-
adopted as an agreement separately from the application. But I'm just saying, I referenced that just as the matter of process. It went to the administrator to, come up with the terms of the agreement, and then presumably back to the council to ratify the agreement. And if that's acceptable, I'll make that my motion.
All right, we have a motion on the floor to extend the interim appointment to a permanent one with, the details to be worked out. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
So my comments on this have to be brief. Again, I sort of felt we had 4 really good candidates, and I think we're very fortunate in that regard. I really hate decisions like this. I pretty quickly narrowed it down to the 2 that I think there seems to be, Mr. Marcello as well. And wrestled with that for some period of time, and fairly familiar with this area of law. And I guess part of it was the fee cap thing, but what really, at the end of the day, became sort of a tiebreaker for me, is what it really comes down is the word integrity. And as a lawyer, it is impossible to know absolutely every single thing about everything. And, I think we have to be cautious about assuming that there's just, this person is this expert in this or this specialist in that. If you look at the portfolio of land use problems that we have, they have come from, in many cases, the advice of these so-called expert attorneys that we've had in the past. I'm not actually aware of a single problem that we have in the last 6 months. Maybe it's still early or current. And a lot of this stuff gets swept in an executive session, and a lot of this is, doesn't come out in the open. And I think maybe it should come out in the open, but we have live litigation cases that are in litigation because of the advice of town solicitors who were not GEO. And, I just think we need to be sort of mindful of that. I do think that a clear legal utilization services policy will help drive this. I have similar questions about how that should come from staff and department head results, and I think that should really come up right away. I know that everybody has the town solicitor's cell phone, for example, but should there be more than one person to incur a certain amount of time? Does it not matter if it's on retainer? These are conversations that I think we really need to have. And I'm just sort of thinking back to, my experience on the Charter Review Commission and watching the solicitor block all of the work that an elected body did for a year. And so I think I'm going to not take the bait to have a really great, deep discussion about agenda and what's in the best interest of the town. And I also don't appreciate this comment of another OMA. There hasn't been an OMA violation other than you claiming that there was one. Now we all worry about whether the agenda says 42 versus 45 or $90 in supply versus 900, because I think it comes across as a personal agenda that's trying to be driven here. What I'll say about Gio, and you've seen it, you can check the tape, he's not afraid to say no. He's not afraid to say no to this side of the table. He's not afraid to say no to this side of the table. I know he's not afraid to say no to our planning board and our zoning board. I think we had everybody in the room trying to do the special permits and sign ordinances, and he was the only guy in the room that said, can't do it. Can't do it, no discretion. And he's not afraid to say it. And I think to me, that's which admittedly was a tough decision, but which leads me into, of those two candidates, of supporting him. And I do think that these are at-will appointments. This is not a contract that is a guaranteed fixed term. What I would suggest we do is we drive our energy into clear expectations. If any member of the council wants to make a phone call, do you get a return call? As you've heard me complain, and I know the prior solicitor admitted, he didn't return my calls. As an elected chair of a body, just didn't return them. That was, is that the standard? I think we can all work towards driving that standard, and that's what I'll personally take the lead on trying to create an outline. And though I know not all of us will be satisfied with an outcome of any one vote, I can at least do my best to try to drive some standards on that. Okay. Any other comments?
Take a vote.
Okay. Any objection to proceeding to a vote? All right. All those in favor?
Are you going to hear from the public?
No.
No. Are you going to hear from
Sure.
the public?
I'll hear from the public. Would you like to hear from the public?
I'd like to.
I'm not going to sit here all night, but
No, I'll give you
just
just
so we're clear, if
few
you attack
minutes.
us, you're not going to attack a candidate.
Nope. Victoria Neville from Connecticut Street. What you just said was perfect. He goes against this side and that side. That's the problem with this town council. It's absolutely 4 against 3. Whoever Mr. Katz, Mr. Coulter, Ms. Cook, or Ms. Driggs vote for is who it's going to be. It's a constant 4-3 vote. So actually, I don't know why you even listen to any of us, because whoever you choose is who's going to be. That man is your friend. He's gotten, now he's been here 6 months, now he's gotten 6 months experience from us. We're not supposed to be teaching him. He's not calling our counselor. That, you just said the other one didn't do that, but you're allowing this one to do it, and you're going to rehire him. He has no experience in one side of what we need experience in. That is not right. I don't know how you're re-electing a friend again. Thank you.
Let's just vote.
Anybody else from the public like to be heard?
I'd like to draw a distinction between having known somebody in a professional capacity and being friends with somebody. If you've worked with a building contractor and they've done well on your house, and then you go to recommend somebody to it, and then you're on a board and you're trying to find a building contractor, recommending the person you have knowledge of who did a good job on your house it's actually a positive, not a negative. There's no friendship here where people are appointing anybody who is.
He's not doing a good
No,
job.
he is doing a very good job.
They were at a party
Good job
together.
for all of you.
Yeah, let's just vote.
So, Stu Gilfillan, 5 Highland. I just had one clarifying question. Councilor DiMederos mentioned, or asked the question earlier, if everybody had checked references, because it was implied that everybody should do their own diligence. I'm curious, did each of you call the references for each candidate?
No, I talked.
I'm sort of asking the counselors for feedback on
I talked to my
that.
number 1 choice.
Okay.
And I only called 1 or 2.
I did not check. I'm speaking for myself. I don't know that you're all required to answer that question, but I've done a lot of hiring and labor stuff over time, and I've found that every candidate will have good references. So I find that it's a little bit of it's like checking. I didn't check to make sure bar licenses were active, but I'm speaking for myself.
I spoke to definitely.
Can you speak into the microphone? Sorry, it's hard to hear you.
I did speak to, as I said, the 2 of the referrals for Chapman, and I did not for Craven, because I frankly made the decision at the time he was here that he didn't want the job. And Marcelo, I did not. And because, frankly, he didn't outweigh what I already felt in terms of ability that we were getting.
Okay.
I did research on him, like Google.
I don't know that I've ever in my 20-plus years as I don't know if I've ever called up a reference and got a bad reference. That's just my. I think it's important to have them. I take a lot more stock in the paper, and frankly,
Sure.
I asked some questions that mattered a lot to me, which were based on public, that type of thing. That's just my point of view.
I understand that. I just might offer that sometimes it's not so much pros and cons, but it's also strengths and weaknesses of a candidate and whether they're a cultural fit for what's a very politically charged environment here.
Barbara Martin, Neck Road. I guess this is a question for all of you. After you had the interviews, was there a special reason why you didn't sit down together in an executive session and discuss all the 4 candidates together?
I don't know if you were here for the whole meeting, but we had.
Oh, no, I was here for the whole meeting.
Well, first of all, I don't think the law allows it, so that's one reason. And secondly, I don't think it's transparent. But that's my answer. On what possible basis in the law do you get to go in executive session? The whole point of open meetings is to be out in the open. And the whole reason that this is how we always did it, and I got advice from the last solicitor, is exactly why we need a new solicitor with good, solid integrity.
See, I disagree, because if you want to talk to, if I got a reference from someone that I felt a little uncomfortable with, I would feel much better talking in private about it and not doing it in public. And that's...
I've written a memo to the council, a one-way communication that would have been privileged.
Well, not only that,
Okay,
but
well,
if,
that's fine.
but if you had some information on somebody and you brought it out publicly and then you found out it wasn't true, wouldn't we be liable for slander? I mean, that's one of the reasons why I don't want to say anything publicly about anybody. You want to discuss it and then come out and then take a vote on the person.
You can discuss in public what
because
you
you
want.
could.
2 points to that. On the first, on the question substantively, I'm not sure. I mean, as public officials, there's a high bar for somebody to libel you. They can say quite a bit, but there's an exception for public. So I don't know that that's much of a concern. But again, I think the appropriate process, as laid out in the open meetings law, would be that you're going to be discussing that person's character, physical or mental health. You need to notify them that you're doing that in order to go into executive session.
Well, I think that any candidate who applies knows that we're going to discuss about them. You can notify them that we're going to discuss it in executive session, but I think they know that when they apply for the job, that you're going to check their references, or you have the right to. So I would think they know that. I mean, if you want to formally inform them, you could.
Yeah, well, it says it has to be advanced in writing.
I would think
for
they
that
know that
agenda
when you
item.
apply for a job.
Nancy,
Mr.
you
Pre-
have an opinion about this because you do a
I
lot
have
of advance
never
notice.
in my years ever notified applicants. In this case, I guess I'd have to notify everyone in Cameron Middle, because the firm is what we're hiring. So are you telling me I have to notice everybody there?
But the Personnel Board goes into executive to talk about candidates. I know they do. I've been present at these. They do exactly what I'm suggesting, because I've been present at these when we did town administrator, when we've done a few of the other things. They go into executive, and you can ask Personnel Board members, and they've never had a problem doing that. But they do go into executive to talk about the different applicants. So maybe we have to notify them that they can't do that anymore.
Maybe, yeah.
Well, I might suggest that we move on from this part of the discussion. There's no one who's sitting here at this table who's an experienced municipal attorney. So are having a discussion amongst ourselves about whether or not this is allowable or not. We'll move on from that. I think, though, what it does speak to a little bit, presuming that the way that the Personnel Board does it is correct and the way that we have historically has done it correct, is that it also speaks to being willing, particularly in matters of personnel, to want to have someone that everybody feels comfortable with. And I unfortunately don't think that whether that necessarily matters to some of my fellow counselors. That may be what it is, but I don't think that we should continue trying to debate whether or not
You can do it.
you can do this or not. None of us are qualified to make that determination.
There's a motion on the floor.
You
So
can
there's
speak
a
for
mo-
yourself.
there's
I can
a-
speak to my qualifications. Thank you.
Can you make a second motion? Can you nominate someone else, or?
Motion's
So
on
you're-
the floor.
Just see
No,
what
there-
this
there-
motion
there's a motion on the
There's a
floor,
motion on the floor,
but
yes.
I'll make a motion to move the motion.
I second.
So I'm going to answer Joe's question, okay? All right. Everybody thinks they're an expert, right? So you can advise that you're going to try to defeat this motion, in which case there'll be an open floor, okay? That's what happened with the Second Amendment. Or you can make a motion to amend the current motion right now. Those are your two options, because there is a live motion on the floor that will have precedence on that. I guess somebody beat you to a motion to move, so if I've got to play parliamentarian, I guess I'll hear that motion first. And I'd like to stress that it is an at-will appointment. So, if we want to have an agenda item to talk specifically about the job qualifications or performance of an actual person of personnel, then we should have that conversation. And if that warrants a revisiting of something, then we should do that. We have that on the agenda tonight for the town administrator. And I do think we need to get an answer to the question on whether the personnel board practices are correct. You can't just, this is how it's always been, or I know a lawyer that says this. You can't pick and choose on these things. Is there any objection to proceeding to a vote on the question?
No.
Councilor Hilton, does that move your motion to move?
Yes.
All right, that motion is moved. Any objection to proceeding to a vote? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed?
No, this is to move the question,
sorry.
correct?
No, it isn't.
I asked if it was, I'm sorry. I
no,
thought
it
I'd
isn't.
asked if that mooted your motion.
Mute
Oh,
your
I
motion.
thought you said move the
No,
I
you
thought you were saying move the motion.
I said move.
I'm sorry. Could you restate them?
I'll try again.
The question is, if we're proceeding to a vote, does that moot your
Mute-
motion?
yeah,
to proceed?
I didn't, I heard move, not moot.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
So what's the motion? I'm sorry.
Point Gio.
I just want to confirm, the next vote will be on the main motion on the floor. Is there any objection to that? Okay, all right. So if the main motion passes, then the interim solicitor will be offered the permanent position, with details of the engagement letter to be, I guess, first kicked over to the town administrator. All right. And we will not sign an engagement letter until it comes back to the council? Do we all agree on that? Okay.
Yep.
We will see the letters. Okay. All right. Does everybody understand what the motion is?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right. I do want to, again, thank all of the applicants, and all of them will be on the special council roster, okay? And I really encourage everybody to, I really mean this, I want to really encourage people to put input into what kind of a utilization. First, help me find a better word than utilization, but once I do that, and maybe I can have you wear the bullseye on that. If you can help me with that, I'd like to really make good on that and try to provide some policy on what reasonable service standards are.
Excuse me, Mr. President, could I just clarify something? You said that all would stay on the council roster? You mean the 4 candidates?
Well, there's no formal roster, but we have appointed special counsel for certain matters.
Right, so I've got
sometimes
to
litigation.
notify these others. I mean,
Right.
I usually send out a letter that says, thank you for your,
Yeah.
interest in Tiverton. We have appointed. Are you telling me to put something else in there? Is that what you're implying?
Can I just remind you that I believe you asked every candidate, would you be willing for us to use you for certain,
I did, and
And they all said yes.
I think that was the right question,
And they
but I
said
don't know
yes.
that I have the framework in place to formally put them on a roster. I don't know that, I think that would need a little more discussion. Unless there's an objection, can Nancy's letter say, as discussed in your interview, your information will be retained on file in the event of potential consideration for a special matter?
Yeah.
Is that,
Yep.
is that okay? It's not a binding?
Yep.
You're seeing more and more of this, and I think that, you know, there might be a discrete litigation matter, or aren't we doing this now in perhaps zoning rewrite where it doesn't have to be the same person for every single thing? We might reach out to them and say, hey, we have this, we have something like 24 live cases, we may want to shop some of them around, try to get caps. This is how a lot of places do it.
Question I have, is that something that we would decide or the solicitor would decide?
I think that is it's our call. I mean, if we stay silent on it, then I think this list, I mean, feel free to jump back in. And this is where I think some policy around this would be good. What I, again, speak for myself, what I'd like to do is take the whole litigation portfolio and sort of assign liaisons to it and start to have some progress on these. So, is that?
Yeah, first,
Feel free
thank
to
you.
disagree.
No, I agree with that, and I think that's something that you know, makes sense to look at that policy and how we deal with it. But let me just first say thank you for your confidence, and I certainly heard the concerns of that were raised, and I will do what I can to try to address those as I continue on.
And I do want to clarify, and I mean, I hope you've heard this from me, because I have told Labor Council that until the council has policy guidance, what I have said is that I don't have any reason why you can't field inquiries from every elected official in the town, the town administrator, every department head, and every board, commission, and committee chair. And that's how it's been going, I think. So, but I would respectfully...
And I remain happy to do so, and would obviously respond to any of the councilors on any issues as I attempt to do.
I guess it's easier for me to say that because, John, I'm a little more mindful of Timsville, but... Okay, guys.
As you noted, Mr. President, it's an at-will contract, but that goes both ways. So.
I don't know, though. I don't know. I think you're ethically bound. It's just like Tony couldn't quit quite as fast as he wanted to. I said, I think you're bound to your client for at least a due transition period. So I'm not going to let you off that easy. All right. Mr. Perry, hey,
Here we are
dog park.
again.
Good news.
70s.
We, well, tell me if I have this wrong, but we are making sure we are squeaky clean on making sure that the $1,000 donation that we had on the spot, was it 2 weeks ago?
Into a restricted
We're going to formally accept that. Did I miss out on anything to add to that? Okay.
No?
Mr. President, I would just, having just briefly looked at this in the interim, I would just note for the record that the contribution was made for the, generically for the purposes of promoting a dog park, and I think, given that there were no further restrictions placed on that it becomes the council's decision as to how that is allocated, particularly, and I just want to make sure the donor is aware of that and understands that, but that aside, I think it's perfectly acceptable.
Okay. Is that, any comment from the public on our interpretation of this as a restricted grant?
So do we have to make it clear that we are taking it as a restricted grant for the dog park? Is that what we're doing tonight?
I think that's the agenda item within the,
Yeah.
and if somehow dog parks become impossible, then I guess it's a side-parade petition to the Attorney General or something like that?
I would hope that we would keep it simple and perhaps offer to return it to the donor at that point.
So the purpose of that was so now people can make donations to this account for that specific thing, the dog park, correct?
Well, I think you can,
Because there are people that want to make donations, but they don't want to just send it so it goes into the general fund. So we want to make sure that...
yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry, yes. So it was noticed as a two-part motion. One is to request that the treasurer create the account, which is restricted, and the second is to accept the first donation. And both of those can be approved in concert.
Okay, my question is who do they give the check to? Do they give it to the treasurer to put into that account?
Joe Terry.
Give to Joe.
I believe we are already holding the check in escrow, and the administrator will hand that off to the treasurer the next business day.
I would imagine it's just town of Tiverton, right?
Yes.
Would be
Yeah,
the-
town of Tiverton.
And maybe put on a memo field, dog
Memo,
park.
dog park.
I was just kidding about Joe.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Barbara.
Life's rough enough already.
So, so this is good news. The dog park is coming. I don't know how long, I don't know when, but I don't think there's a split on this council. I think there's unanimous support for one, and we don't know where just yet. Hopefully, a big one and a little one next to each other, maybe. And let's get a formal motion. Joe, will that be your motion?
Yes.
All right.
Second?
Can we have a second? Any further discussion? Questions or comments from the public? Okay. All those in favor? 6 so unanimous. Okay, Madam Clerk, Bay Street. What we got?
This is the 4F, that was the 9H.
H.
This goes on the council agenda every 6 months. It's to extend the moratorium in the Bay Street area. I did not make for all the councilors, but I do have in my office the listing of each parcel and what has been recorded on it, whether it's land use restrictions or, and those files, there's 2 file cabinets down in the archives that we keep all that. It's also recorded and cross-referenced by lots and by owners. So that's just too lengthy to be putting in part of your backup, but I do have a copy here. If anybody wants it, I can email it to them. So we do it on a 6 months because we're hoping there are, I believe, 3 or 4 more parcels that have Hoffman Engineer handles this, and that they've kind of struggled to get a release or a sign-off from any of the owners. And it'd be my recommendation that the council have a workshop and find out more all about this. Mr. Hoffman, Bob Hoffman with Hoffman Engineer, has been involved with this from the beginning. As well, I don't think any of the councilors here have been involved with it, but I have, certainly for years. So this is just to extend for another 6 months. It'll carry us till last meeting in December. If all the parcels are not resolved by then, we'll have to put it on again. And you do have the full moratorium, though, on the boundaries, and there is a process if any digging or anything like that goes on in that area.
Nancy?
It
Yes.
was my understanding that the 2020, this has to be dealt with. So I think we need to start.
It was not extended in June of 2018 for 6 months, according to this.
It was.
It should have been extended till December of 2018.
Yes, it was extended to December, yes.
There's
I have
nothing
it.
on here,
Yes,
that's what I was questioning.
Yeah, it's
so.
just not on that part,
All right.
but I did have it on.
Okay.
Absolutely, I remember it.
I'll take your word
Because you
for
had
it.
just began, it was in December, and that's why.
Right.
But yes.
Take your word for it.
So,
Workshop on that.
I
So
mean,
I was
usually the
talking to-
council or somebody's the one who should want to put it on, but I just keep putting it on as a kind of a reminder, you've got to keep voting on this.
And I need to catch up with Mr. Kendricks about, I had suggested a joint workshop in some manner with their work. I think that might have been more broad than just Bay Street, but I have that on my Q3 list, so.
Yes.
Can I look back and then I'll report back to you on
I tell you,
setting for workshop?
this should be
Its own, on its own? Okay.
in my opinion, don't you think so?
Well, if it needs to be its own, you want to schedule it
This needs its
now?
own workshop. You need to come up to speed on this.
Yeah, I was going to say, when we first, shortly after we got on in December, the extension was on our consent agenda, just to get it done. This time, we put it on new business in order to up the ante and force the issue a little bit. And this isn't, Bay Street's an issue I hear quite a bit about. People want to resolve the question one way or the other. And so I think we should definitely move forward with a workshop in the third quarter to at least figure out what decision we have to make, and then to start the process of making it.
Do you want to attempt to schedule that now, or should we think about that?
Let me send dates, because we've got the July
We already have the July
29th
one.
for,
I'm thinking September.
so August or
I
September.
don't know if that's too
Let me
late, but I'm thinking.
Let me see when Mr. Hoffman can, and I'll send dates.
And I'll talk to Leroy about the other workshop, and I'll report back to you. Okay, I think we need a vote on this agenda item then. May I have a motion, please?
I'll move to approve the Bay Street moratorium extension to December 31, 2019.
Second.
Questions or comments from the public? This has been extended for a number of times. We're going to try to set this for a workshop sometime in July, August, or September, and try to move this difficult subject along for a decision. Okay. I'm sorry, second was Joe? Okay. Hearing no further comments, all those in favor of the motion? It's unanimous. Approved as presented. Treasurer Surratt? No. Oh, sorry. Counselor Cook, I wasn't trying to skip you. Discussion and possible action regarding ordinance amendments to Chapter 10 animals. Thank you.
We do have the complainant in the room, and I'm glad that she's here. I did attach the letter that she sent out, and to be fair, Tricia is also knowledgeable about this. She did go down to the area.
I went down too.
Quite a few of us did.
Not at the
and-
same time, though.
Nope.
No,
Just check.
no.
I went by
it wasn't
myself.
a group thing. I lived, to just say, I lived across the street from Christine. My mom was, that's where I grew up. My mom lived there for quite a while after I left. And it was a nice neighborhood, actually kind of smelly now, actually. It wasn't, hey, I have to say, and it was 55 degrees and it was raining, and I was like, oh my goodness.
I went in the sunshine and it was.
Oh,
smelly.
I don't even want to think about it, really. I don't. So I don't know, Christine, if you want to get up.
Assume you're okay with this letter being part of public record?
She gave
course,
permission.
yes.
Okay.
Oh, she said
This is Christine Tulin, and I'm just keep calling you Christine, which isn't quite
Well,
formal enough, but.
That's
anyway,
fine.
Thank you, Christine.
Yes, Christine Tulin, 132 John Dugan Road. As Councilor Cook said, it was a nice neighborhood. I've been there for 18 years. It's at the bottom of a dead-end road, if you're not familiar with the area. My main concern, besides the smell and the noise, first let me say,
Is the rats.
the properties, where the properties butt, my neighbor has 8 goats and about 30 chickens. His property is not accommodating to this type of wildlife, wild stock, and he keeps them in a coop smaller than what you folks are sitting in right now. And the smell is atrocious. There is no proper manure management whatsoever. The presence of rats is disgusting. My garage door is closer to where the rats are than where his house actually is. So I'm afraid to keep my garage door open when we're doing yard work. The noise from these animals is just as bad as the smell. We've started constructing a fence. If you've been down there, you've seen the very bare minimum of what we've done. And it's my understanding that I have to put the finished side of my fence facing his property. But yet, if you've been down there, you see what's facing my property. And it's appalling to know that coming closer to retirement, I want to sell my house. My property value has got to be lower than what it should be with the way that this is looking and smelling, and it's just, it's abhorrent. I don't even know what else to say about it. It's my property value, the rats, the smell, the noise, it's all of it. And I am not using this council as a personal vendetta whatsoever. I mean, this is my family cannot even enjoy our outdoor living space without the smell. And it's not even the noise so much. I can live with the noise. It's the smell is so bad. He has a billy goat, and I don't know if you know anything about farm animals, but billy goats are disgusting. They don't belong in somebody's backyard. I mean,
And he's very close to your property
he's
line,
on.
so
If you,
he's on your
he's
property
on
line.
my property line.
I have a picture. He's
Yeah,
right
no,
on.
no,
the-
I was there.
Yeah, I
He's
know.
right there.
I've been told that he can have that structure there from the interim building and zoning commissioner, which, listening to you all talk about zoning, and it's very discouraging because this is my issue. As a taxpayer, there's got to be something that can be done about this besides me just living like this. It's been years I've been like this. Maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, I complained about it, and the building inspector at the time went down there and cited him and told him, you have to move this away from her property. And he did. Now, if you notice, there's one little coop that's further away from my property than the other two, and he has since come right back onto my line.
How long has he had the animals?
He's continually getting more and more within the past, I'll say, 5 years. Yep. I've talked to him about it. I've been civil with him about it. I have police reports about it. I've found goats on my deck where my family eats, in my backyard, on my fireplace, in my yard, chickens in my yard. It's not a farm.
So let me just, if I can just jump in. And just so we're clear on the agenda, this is also relevant to 10A1, right? The resident complaint?
Apparently, yeah.
Okay, so I just want to make sure we're kind of hitting 2 agenda items at the same time. And is the neighbor here? Okay,
No.
So I just want to, if the neighbor wants to come talk to us, since you've had the opportunity, I just want to make sure that you will have speaking opportunity and priority. And I just need a little clarity on the process, because this is, at least part of the agenda is coming in as a ordinance change request. And so I don't know, we have to be mindful of our roles. We're not the building official, but this is also an ordinance change request. So can somebody kind of help me with where we are in the process, and are we heading right to an ordinance request, or should we suggest the administrator, and we have a new building official now, look at this matter? Can you help me? Do you understand? I don't want to adjudicate this.
Just in terms of the process, I don't want to just skip ahead. So I think if you want to incorporate the second item, I think that would be the best approach by suggesting we change the agenda to include that with this. You could vote to do that, and that will allow Jan to speak to what I believe he's prepared to speak to. The only comment that I've had, or discussion I've had on the zoning piece, that's the one in front of us right now, was that I suggested to Councilor Cook that if you are interested in some sort of zoning change, I would need some guidance in order to draft something for your consideration. And so I think after Jan provides his summary, if you decide that you would like to direct me to look at how other towns deal with those issues or whatever that is, you can do so under this agenda item. But I don't want to skip around in the agenda without having a vote to do that.
May I? It has been brought to my attention that he has had several violations and has since ignored them.
That was
Because
my question.
there's two potential issues, and maybe they're both existing. One issue is the ordinance does what you'd like it to do, but it's not being enforced. And the other issue we might hear is that what you're describing is actually a permitted issue, permitted use, and then we have to consider change. I mean, so I just need to know where we are on those 2 topics. So why don't I kick it over to Mr. Administrator? Oh, is there any objection to consolidating 10A1 with,
Is what?
we take the open meetings act very seriously. 10A1 with 9I.
With I.
All right. Do you want to, can I claim that with no objection, or you want to actual?
It's 10A1.
Say that again, 10A1.
10A1, which is the town
right.
administrator
With-
update on resident complaint regarding farm
All right, I
animals.
get it.
Oh, can we be more specific, 10A1A, just in case the administrator has any other comments?
Very well. Yeah, good point. 10A1A will consolidate with 9I. Is there any objection to that?
Not if he's got good news, no.
In a minute, so note. Mr. Administrator.
Thank you. I was actually not aware that I was going to be a separate agenda item. but here we are. Now we're consolidated, makes me feel better. What has happened here, and I think in terms of what is the process here, you have a complaint. The complaint goes to the building office, zoning office, to see if they can do anything. And the complainant has done that. She also copied me on it, and I've responded to it. When I first got the email, I made sure that building and zoning was going to look into it and address it. I also tried to make sure that we didn't have separate investigations under the building code on the one hand and the zoning code on the other hand, but that they would talk to each other to see how combined they might come up with an evaluation of what under the existing ordinances we as the town can do. And they did that. One thing that was learned pretty quickly, that our zoning ordinance does not explicitly address the issue of whether farm animals can be kept in a residential district. And that's problematic. I was told, but I have no reason to know that it's true or not, that at some point in the past there were other ordinance provisions that allowed us to do more, but they were repealed. That may be actually something having to do with the animal control officer rather than zoning. I don't know. This is, in the first instance, a case where the ordinance, the zoning ordinance in particular, does not give us authority to say you can't do this unless, it violates maybe other things. And that's where, for example, under the building code, you have the minimum building maintenance provisions. They come into play, and they were used to issue a notice to the neighbor here in this regard. In addition, when you have rats, and that was complained about as well, that clearly is a public health and safety issue too, and that too can be addressed under the minimum building maintenance code. It can also be addressed by the State Department of Health, which I believe may well have a role to play here. So the interim zoning official didn't see things that clearly violated any part of our ordinance. I'm not saying that's how it should be, but the ordinance lacks certain things that we may well need in order to enforce against the kinds of things that have been complained about here. What has been done was issued a notice of unsafe conditions to the neighbor. We first had difficulty getting that delivered or picked up after we put a notice on the door that there was this order that needed to be picked up. Over the weekend, it was actually delivered with the help of the police department. This morning, he was in the office here talking to building and zoning as to what needs to be done. In the notice is a requirement to get an exterminator immediately. I think it was yet until July 6th, I think, to get it done. But an exterminator needs to be called in to take care of the rat problem in the first instance. And then the question remains, what can you do in terms of, is this okay under zoning? If not, does the council want to, start work on a ordinance amendment that specifically addresses these kinds of animals, probably within a residential district or not? I think that's going to require a little bit of research as to what did we have in the past, if anything. Also, looking at what other communities have, because there are other communities who have struggled with similar issues, and different ones have done different things, but trying to find what might be a solution that fits our situation, all of which takes, unfortunately, more time. But I think there is a process for this that needs to be followed in terms of, certainly the council, as a matter of policy, can provide guidance. We want you to start working immediately on a zoning amendment or instruct the solicitor to do that. But in the first instance, the only thing we could do immediately was issue that notice of unsafe conditions and require this person to get an exterminator to deal with the rats. The rats are associated with, for example, having chickens. Whenever you have animals and you feed them, you tend to attract rats as well. So one thing will lead to another, but the question is really, do we have the proper authority to be able to do what ultimately needs to be done? The new building official is aware of this as well, and I think I asked him this morning to make sure that he called the complainant and talk about this. He has a certain perspective on how to deal with these situations. This situation, that will become a question for the council as well, because you could say that in a community like Tiverton, in some areas, it's not necessarily a problem to have this, depending on, how many residences, how close to
Right.
this kind of thing. So the other thing is that sometimes it can be done in a way that's less of a nuisance, like if the person who has the animals manages to keep the animals on his own property instead of letting it go onto other properties. So that all needs to be looked at in terms of how you fine-tune an ordinance, I believe. But that's where we currently are. We're looking at getting the exterminator there and dealing with the rat problem in particular. And I did say to the building official, I do think you need to keep looking at potential zoning issues, such as, is there a setback requirement from the property line?
That's what I
I
was
don't
gonna
believe there is one applicable. It may depend a little bit on how you interpret certain structures or not, but I think there is an issue there that needs to be looked into further. He's going to do that. And it may be another thing that if that's not on the books, then it should be in the books, especially if you're in an area where residences are located closely together.
So is he required to show proof of this exterminator that he needs to hire?
Yes.
So if he keeps the animals, aren't the rats just going to come back? Yes.
Well, doesn't it have to do with how clean he keeps it? This happened before.
It is, but I think
In
there's
another
a,
section of town
there's a
years ago.
legitimate question, and I really know what I don't know.
Right.
And I think it's important for me to know what I don't know, and it's that. I'm not an expert in these things. I think that we need to know whether you can keep these kinds of animals in a way that doesn't disturb, the enjoyment of other people's properties.
That's the first question. We've got some ambiguity apparently in the zoning ordinances, but the authority
It's
on
not
the-
only the zoning, though, it's the actual, almost like,
the building.
no, it's knowing about animals, and can you keep them in an area like this so that it doesn't create a nuisance? I don't know the answer to that. That needs to be figured out. If you can't, then it's relatively easy to draft a zoning ordinance amendment, I believe.
Rob, we had a similar problem about 7 years ago, and I do know that the Department of Health got involved. Now, I don't know how, I don't know if we notified them.
I've called the Department of
Okay.
Health. I've had the state
Okay.
vet come down and assess the situation. And he told me that as long as the animals are not in danger, there's nothing he can do about it.
Did you tell them about the rats?
I
though?
did not.
Because that's where they got involved, was because of the rats. And it was a safety issue, of course, because of disease and
Right.
everything else.
So-
That's how they got involved. It was because of the
And
rats.
I've asked the building official, or the building and zoning official, to call the department regardless, because there is a tendency for us to want to fix these things ourselves, even though we don't necessarily have the tools. I say you need to look beyond it, put them on notice that this is happening, they may need to do an inspection. If we have trouble getting the exterminator to do its job, we need to be able to get the department here right away. I think that's an important point, and Councilor DiMederos had pointed it out to me, that we pursue that as a parallel path, so to speak, because the state does have more authority. I've also told that enforcement by the state varies greatly.
Yeah.
So-
Well, it depends on how much you complain
Right.
and get on it.
Question I have for Gio, if we change the ordinance, is he anyway grandfathered in because he's been doing this for years?
I think it depends on how you change the ordinance, but I think you can make changes that would, you can't be grandfathered into a nuisance, right? I think, this is not going to be a complete answer, and I apologize, but for example, you have an animal section in your ordinance that says that people are not allowed, it is unlawful to allow animals to wander off the property. You do not have a penalty built into that section. So it's unlawful, but so what? If you were to put a penalty on there and give the police department some guidance as to how they could enforce, or the administration some guidance as to how staff could enforce. You're not grandfathered in because it's already unlawful. You're just changing the fine from who knows what to whatever you change it to. So I think that that's a fair question. You know, if somebody has a building that's built 10 feet from a property line and you say that chicken coops have to be 50 feet, that's probably grandfathered in.
And of course, it would have to be applicable. You can't do just
Could-
that street,
Right,
right?
right.
You can't spot zone or spot criminalize.
Or you could say you're only allowed 3 chickens instead of 30 chickens, or is something like that, you can
Yeah,
write
and-
that
and-
into
and
an
a lot
ordinance?
of- I mean, there has been a flurry of chicken ordinances
Yeah.
around Rhode Island in the last 10
I
years,
know.
not to put too fine a point on it.
In favor of chicken.
In favor of them, right, to allow them, and to actually think through how a town can allow these. And they tend to be 6 birds, or 5 birds,
Right.
or no roosters, or
I have-
whatever.
well, I-
roosters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a
Oh,
neighbor right
oh,
near
he
me,
has
he's got
roosters.
chickens and roosters, and the rooster crows all day long, not just in the
30
morning when the sun comes up.
30 chickens?
30 chickens and, I don't know, a couple of roosters at least, because I hear
Do you have
them.
any, are there young kids around?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a very,
Yeah, I'm familiar with the street as well. Just summarizing where we are. So we've proceeded with the notice based on our own building official, our own building code. And so far, but what we need more research and study on are the boundaries of the permitted use to begin with. I mean, we almost need that information before we even could tackle amending the ordinance. Is that, just disagree if I have this wrong? Okay.
I think it's
So-
2 parts. I think one is the boundaries under zoning and building. I think the second, the police chief should be consulted as to general nuisance law. You may not, I don't want to say it this way, you would think, one would think, and this is, I think I would have to defer to the police chief on this, but at some point, this becomes a actionable nuisance.
Nuisance.
And I don't know what that standard is. I think that's the problem. Maybe all we need to do is define a standard that will allow the police chief to then take action. But I think that's part of the conversation. It's not just building, zoning, land use.
And that was, you predicted my next question, because there's always the opportunity for a private nuisance complaint, which
Absolutely.
is costly and takes a lot of time, and I don't think we're suggesting that's your only avenue, but we might need more, at least for me, clarity on the boundaries between public nuisance that we can speak to and private nuisance, which still.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely would encourage anyone who had a concern like this to solicit legal advice, and maybe it wouldn't be, you know, I don't know what it would cost somebody, and I don't think that should be your only option, but given where the town code is today, that would certainly be the most effective and quick option. If this does rise to the level of a private nuisance, a judge can find that pretty quickly and order, you know, enjoin the property owner from keeping goats running free or you know, without a fence or something along those lines. And that's not that it's a great answer, but it's an answer.
Yeah, I mean, we might want to at least do some consultations if you haven't.
30 chickens is a nuisance.
Council members and town officials, the one thing that I'd like to bring up is I'm listening to everything that's being addressed.
Their name for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. Glenn Sylvia, Christine Tulin's boyfriend. Everything is being addressed as far as possibly buildings not being constructed properly, not in the right location. We have a problem with rats. We're looking at getting, you know, that resolved. He could have someone come in monthly, weekly, daily to take care of the rat problem. The state may come down and say, well, he's doing a great job in taking care of the animals. He builds these beautiful pens and they're heated and they're air conditioned in the summer. But the one thing that I'm not hearing addressed that Christine brought up earlier, we cannot open the windows. We cannot use the deck. We cannot sit in the yard. And that is not starting June 1st when the weather gets warm. This is July 25th. This is December 25th. It doesn't matter what the weather is. We cannot sit outside and enjoy this with family members or just the 2 of us. People come over to visit. Wow, what's that smell? That's the first thing we get. The taxes are based on the view from that house. We have to enjoy the view through glass. We can't sit on the deck and enjoy the view. This is the biggest thing. If we have new building laws changed, if you change the ordinance, as long as the animals are there, that's the biggest problem. She's losing the use of a big part of her property. And this is the thing that I'm hoping the council and town officials remember. That's really the big push. Like town administrator said, he's been warned. He might say, I'll get somebody here weekly, daily, to take care of the rats. I'll move my building. I'll give them the best thing to live in. It's the smell. That's really, at the end of the day, what a big part of that is boiling down to be.
If I may.
You've been there, you know what he's talking about. I mean,
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be sunshiny, it doesn't have to be hot, it doesn't have to be raining.
Well-
It stinks. It's disgusting.
I just want to repeat what I said earlier. I said to the building official that, okay, good, we have that notice out, and we're going to get hopefully an exterminator there. That is not the end-all solution. So I had that discussion with him, that more needs to be done. Frankly, we talked about municipal law a little bit ago. This is about, under municipal law, what can the town do versus what a private party can do. That's the answer I need to what I think is a core question. Because we all hear this and we think it's a terrible situation, but we need to have authority to be able to say, you can't do this. Or otherwise, either the police chief or you need to get a lawyer, which is not really the thing we want to say. The other thing I want to mention is what I actually also like, it's not necessarily the solution either, but the new building official says, you go talk to people. And say, regardless of even the law, you don't do this in a residential neighborhood like this. You need to think of your neighbors and have a serious discussion with this guy and say, look, this doesn't work.
Go buy a farm.
Sooner or later. At least that needs to be, that's not necessarily the guaranteed solution either, but it's at least part of the approach that we need to take. So I think we're going to try to be a little bit more involved with that person. But in the meantime, I really need a legal opinion as to what is our authority.
He
'Cause I
must
don't.
smell it too.
We had that problem.
If you saw the property, I mean, in addition to the livestock, there's a green swimming pool, and I don't mean green as in it's painted green on the outside. I mean it's
Not
green.
environmentally green.
No, it's not environmentally green. There are some dilapidated cars. There are a number of buildings that are in rather poor condition. It's this doesn't seem to be a person for whom the aesthetics of their property are terribly important above and beyond the animal situation here.
There may well be additional, minimum building maintenance issues here. I'm not convinced that we've exhausted that at all, but again, that's, I think, where, between solicitor and building official, we need to do more active inquiry.
Clear, because we want to be part of the solution, but we'll run in, the police has a discretion, we can set policy, we can change the ordinances. We can't pick up the phone and command the police chief, nor can we frankly pick up the phone and command the town administrator to specifically enforce this item. But we can get very smart on what the issues are, we can set policy, set priorities even, we can certainly change the ordinance, but we will not be able to do that tonight, I hope.
Of course.
Oh, it's understandable. Sure.
We can do that.
I would be willing to, as we used CRC Shepherd, and be in contact with the parties involved, whether it's zoning and building, and trying to bring these ordinances with the solicitor's help and the town administrator's help to be on the agendas for the hearings and to get it moving. I also would like to know, from an assessor's point of view, how much her property has lost value.
Well, that's another really good point. I
gonna
think
be
we
hard,
would
yeah.
do well to benefit from knowing if that's taken into account.
I think that's important.
And where are you on the fence? Have you already erected the fence?
No,
I saw
we've
that,
just,
okay.
She can't.
Putting the
About
post
8
in, we have
posts in.
120 feet to go, so
Yeah.
we're putting the post in.
Okay.
I
Is that-
think they have to, don't you have to have someone go over there and decide where your property ends? You need
The
a-
property's been surveyed. There are
Okay, that's
markers,
what I
there's a
want.
marker.
Okay,
So he's putting the fence probably 5 feet maybe beyond the property.
what do you do about the smell?
Exactly.
Well, that's the whole thing. At the end of the day, and we appreciate what everyone here is doing,
Yeah.
I just don't want to lose sight of the smell, because that really is what we're paying for the erection of the fence, which is going to be thousands of dollars, but it has nothing to do with the smell. You know?
Are you assuming we went as fast as we possibly could, which is probably something like, if I understand the three-step ordinance process, 2 months would be light speed. This being Tiverton, I mean, that would really be. Are you putting that fence in no matter what, or?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
At this
It's-
point, definitely.
That is, okay.
Definitely.
So, so
You're going 5 feet off the line, 5 feet.
Well, they eat my trees.
Well,
Yeah.
down where the pens are, because I'm putting it at the top of the hill.
I would certainly recommend, given that what we do have in the ordinance is a wandering animals
Yeah,
law.
I have
You should really
police
document.
reports. I
Yeah.
have contacted and I'm almost, at this point, it's almost embarrassing that I call. I'm like, my neighbor's goat is on my property. I mean, it's embarrassing.
I understand. I would encourage you to continue
Oh,
that
I
at least
do.
until we have a plan of action here.
My
But I think that
landscaper is
may be.
running over rats with the lawnmower.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a terrible situation.
And he has said that he'd put that in paper if you needed it.
Yeah, well,
As he's cutting the grass
Next time
along
the
the.
goat's on your deck, put it
Yeah.
in your car, bring it to the police station,
Yeah.
let them lock it up. Lock it up.
Did we
He'll
have our new
appreciate
ACO in place? She's been trained up?
Is-
She's, well, trained up, and she's done a little bit of her research and couldn't believe what was repealed. Like, under the animal control ordinance, apparently, the only thing that she can deal with is dogs.
yeah.
right.
It's
So,
strange.
so I'm
So I do have one question. At the very least, I don't know if this, I'm sorry.
She's been waiting for that. I'll come back in.
no. Go ahead, Christine. It's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
At the very least, if he has all these animals, if we have to register our dogs, do these animals have to be registered? Because I'm sure they're not.
No, I don't think so.
Farm animals, no.
Farm animals.
Farm animals aren't. So,
I'm sorry, Counsel, and if I may play on that, what he has told the police when they've come is, I'm sorry, they're my emotional support animals. So be prepared for that.
Exactly. But
We've
my
watched him
emotional
pick his chickens up in front of us and kiss them.
Sounds like you need an emotional support lion.
Well, that's, yeah.
I was thinking something even bigger.
so, having seen this, this is clearly not a tenable situation. However, I might suggest that if we're going to go forward with this, our best hope of getting something done in a short time frame is to look to a combination of potentially the new animal control officer, who seems to be pretty sharp and pretty motivated about this, the building official, and potentially include the Eastern Rhode Island Conservation District. And I say that because this is one of those things in Tiverton where there are so many different kinds and a lot of legitimate farm properties, and you can start and say, well, we'll have setbacks, you can't have. And then you forget that in South Tiverton, there are tons of properties where the stone walls are the pens, and those are the property marks. So you could end up with something that comes in front of the council, and it's completely not doable. So I think the best hope is to get people who are as experienced and can think this through all the way, so we have the best hope of passing something. And it's probably going to end up being some combination of regular ordinances and zoning ordinances. It won't, it may not be able to be done with just one piece. And you have to think it all the way through as to how it's going to affect people who legitimately keep animals and keep animals well versus this particular situation. So if the chief is amenable to the animal control officer, the new building official who, coming from Little Compton, has a certain amount of experience with farm properties, and I do recommend the Conservation District because they've got a lot of experience with farm properties. They do a lot of work with farm properties in terms of best practices and manure management and all that other kind of stuff. I mean, they've got a whole lot of perspective that some combination of those folks to come back to us with some solutions might get us something that we could pass relatively quickly.
Yeah, and just so you know, the animal control officer already had, certain ideas about what you need to add to the ordinance. And building official and she have been talking about that. I said, that's great, but it has to go through the chief. If it's an animal control thing, the animal control officer needs to talk to the chief brings it to us to, get a draft ordinance in front of you, things like that. So that is happening. I hadn't thought about the Eastern Conservation District. We can certainly talk to them in terms of, what insight they may have about what you can do to improve the practices there. I have the feeling that this is ultimately one, is this tenable, this use, not just how it's done, but, can you do this in an area like this without causing that kind of an impact? I have no idea.
I think we, in the first instance, look to the animal control officer to reach out to the specialists.
We'll do what we can, because the other thing, I think Joe had actually an excellent point, that if you rush to pass an ordinance, then you might run into this grandfathering issue, unintended consequences. You need to sort it out and say, try to make sure you adopt it in such a way that it can apply to what's currently going on.
Especially if he says they're service animals, then we really got another.
Oh, come on, I don't know if you could really do that.
Okay, so
If he's kissing them.
There's 30 chickens, it's not one.
Who knows, he may say they're his service animals.
all right, well, the neighbor's not here, so let's be mindful of that. Okay. All right.
Well, you can come and tell us.
So we have a plan. These things always take time. If I try to make it faster, this guy will tell me no matter what you may have heard. So
No.
we will go as quick as we can. Who owns this right now? You got it?
But I will coordinate, I've been trying to coordinate with building official in particular, building official animal control, and I will make sure that somehow we reach out to.
And
Mr.
Geo
Custer.
probably.
And Geo needs to be very much involved, because none of us have the expertise to say, under the ordinance, this you can do, this you need an ordinance amendment, whatever, that needs to be.
This is a great opportunity where, like, a memo that is pre-circulated in draft form, before you're locked in to sort of a final answer, so
Right.
we all have the opportunity to review and comment. This reminds me of last week with the sort of gray area, especially when there's gray. And share, with the public, share, review, comment. And you have a sponsor, so we'll bring this back up in, feels like 4 to 8 weeks, something like that, or? what do you think?
Well,
No one's here.
I'll have to stay in contact with you, Jill, because we're the one that puts the ordinance together. I can contact some of the other people, and Truth is always welcome to work with me with it, because she has a lot of good ideas also.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Tulin's daughter, isn't it?
Just want to make sure, as we hit 3 hours, are there at least 2/3 of us that are willing? I actually think that we actually will not. I don't think we're having the executive session, so if we can hang in there for another
We're not?
20 minutes.
We're not having executive?
I don't believe we are. So is everybody okay keeping going on here? Okay, all right. Mr. Treasurer, thank you for waiting.
Why are we not?
You're not doing the odds evaluation.
This has to do with the industrial park and setting aside funds in a restricted account.
I'm just following-
Ambiguity.
Following up on the resolution from the FTR last May,
This May.
which passed no less than 25% of the proceeds for each sale is set aside in the restricted account for industrial park infrastructure. So we sold the parcel for the storage facility, $185,000. So
And we sold the other one, right? No. The wood one, no.
I don't think that's closed yet.
It's not closed. Not closed. Okay.
It's not closed. So I'm just preparing for the end of the year. So you folks need to decide how much you want to set aside.
We did 25 last time.
You did 100%.
Oh, that's right.
The first parcel for Longplex was around 140,000, so that the whole thing was set aside.
It's going to go towards infrastructure.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to set 25% as the amount to be set aside for the restricted account for costs related to developing the industrial park on this sale.
That's 46,250.
25%, that's what we'll set aside for, in the restricted account for costs related to developing the industrial park.
Justin, would you consider going a little higher?
Yeah, I was going to say, where is this located, this? What part of the park is this located in?
Well, it
Do we
doesn't
have-
matter, but it's for infrastructure, and we have those roads that we need to.
Right,
Is he
that's what I'm
asking
saying,
what
that's what I'm
property?
saying, whereabouts is it?
It's
We might have to
before
put in
Long-
longer
No.
distance of asphalt. and-
This one's before Longplex.
Okay, fine.
But we do know we have to pave some roads that only have the surface coat on, and we have, I would go 50%.
About
But
sewage.
if you're not, I'm just asking if you would consider going higher. Because I'll just make another motion.
Do we, can someone remind me, did the budget that was voted on and passed, did that count on any of this money? I know we had talked
No.
about the rollovers
No.
and capital.
I don't think it counted on it.
Okay.
It talked
But
about
it-
it, but it did, no, I mean, it didn't
It's
count.
using 300,000, that's
There.
pretty much is all that's there, so.
Okay.
So this account's at zero.
Yeah. One of the other upsides to putting a little more in, because I have a feeling ultimately at the end of the day, that if we have a recycling center, it's going to be in the land, it's going to be in the industrial park, and if we have a little extra that we can put towards getting electricity or whatever it is we
Just to
need
pay for
there.
the zoning attorney, I guess.
That might not be a bad thing to have a little extra money that we can put towards that.
I agree. I mean, you're going to need some money in that account to be able to deal with infrastructure issues, no doubt about it.
Do we agree, well, I don't know if the building itself, there would certainly be infrastructure related to a recycling station or a transfer station.
Will there be-
Infrastructure,
Well,
right?
the
If not
paving
actual
and the
building.
electricity or whatever else.
Yeah.
I say when in doubt, you
Utilities we
split
need.
it. Well, it's your motion, but.
No, well, my concern is, in this and in other things, is we don't have very good sense of when we can spend money out of certain accounts for what and what the process is. In the absence of that, my feeling is that money in the general fund is just as good as money in the restricted account if we come up with something we want to do. And if some of the expense has to be for a zoning attorney, I don't know if that counts as infrastructure, developing the industrial park, probably does.
I was not entirely
He
serious
was
about.
kidding.
But I'm just saying, it's a,
But the
there are-
voters have to take it out of the general fund, and that would be at another referendum, when if we needed it quicker, as a council, we can,
yeah, I'm not convinced we can spend out of a restricted account without authorization, personally.
but there was authorization. It was a resolution.
The resolution passed.
Right, but we can spend up to that amount, but,
It doesn't-
but this would be in addition to that, without authorization to spend. It's a gray area for me, and in that situation, I assume leave money freed up. If we run into an expense we need to spend money on, we can find that money will still be there in some other account, we just need to find a way to get it.
So if we did 100%, that would not leave us short on the enacted budget?
No.
Because
If we
did
nobody
zero.
was counting on.
No, it's
So-
at zero right now.
Okay, well, I guess we don't normally debate these before we have a second.
Yeah,
What
I'm
the heck?
sorry.
Is there a second to
I was hoping to
the
change his
percentage at
motion.
25%? Okay, second call, is there a second for the motion at 25%? Hearing none, it's an open floor. Is there any other main motion?
I'd like to make a motion for 100% of the proceeds to go into the special account.
They're going with 50.
I changed my mind.
Second.
You had me at 50.
You had me at 52.
I'm sorry.
All right, 50.
Second.
See, we wheel and deal here. Okay.
We compromise on
We have a
that.
motion and a second at 50%. Floor is open for discussion. Any questions or comments? Questions from the public?
I think we should do
You okay with 50? It's not a fair question.
it. She wants 100.
All right. Any objections to proceeding to a vote? Hearing none. All those in favor of 50%? Any opposed? Thanks for bringing this.
Oh, no problem.
Sorry
Thank
for
you.
going so late. All right.
Still like 100.
Mr. Administrator, this is approval to enter into electricity supply contract with Power Options under the Renewable Energy Aggregated Purchase Program offered by the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns, subject to review and approval by the town solicitor and ratification by the town council. Did we just do this?
No,
I'm thinking of the
it's a
other
different
credits.
thing. What we did recently was an agreement for a discount on electricity rates by participating in a project that a solar developer has. It's called a net metering agreement. This is a change in a program that was started by the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns to promote the use of renewable energy, but also to make it cheaper for municipalities to get electricity that way. And they do that through what's called an energy aggregation program. So that literally you sort of pool the demand of the various municipalities that participate and thereby have some bargaining power to get favorable rates. We have actually been participating in an agreement like this, under which we have worked with a company called Direct Energy, providing similar services to what is proposed here. That contract is expiring, and its agreement with the League of Cities and Towns is expiring, depending on which municipality. It was either last year or this year. Our agreement expires, I believe, in December of this year. So the league went out and looked for who currently has the best deal, so to speak, to offer, and they selected Power Options, and Power Options is sort of a broker type of organization. They then contracted with a company, Constellation, that is willing to do finding the proper supply and providing the supply at a favorable rate. We're currently still waiting for an analysis of, given our demand and the history of our electricity accounts, how much we can expect to save, get a ballpark estimate, because you can't get a very specific estimate into the cent or anything. They're looking at that right now. My concern is that, as you know, I believe our membership in the league is running out very shortly. And I've tried to figure out whether we can still take advantage of this program, because I think it's beneficial to the town to get a favorable rate whenever we can. This would basically allow me to continue working with not so much the league, but this Power Options. And I included information in the packet. Hopefully you've been able to read it. To continue with this outfit, Power Options, and negotiate a contract to basically replace the contract that we have with Direct Energy. And obviously, when the contract is developed, it would be subject to council approval.
This is just a kind of check-in to make sure there's some consensus to keep working towards the contract, and we'll come back for review.
Yeah.
Floor is open. Any questions or comments for the administrator? I think you have the longest agenda item.
I'll move to approve the administrator's request.
Okay. Will there be a second?
I'll second.
Me or Donna?
I think
Donna.
Denise had
Was
that.
it you?
Yeah.
Okay, it was me and you that both said second, so.
Yeah, all right.
Me or Donna?
right, the hour's late. I just want to make sure everybody's had the time they need to. I don't think this is your final decision, though. So just want to make sure if you have any final strong objections, the administrator doesn't waste his time working on this. Anyone is, okay? Okay, all right. All those in favor? Okay, thanks for checking in on that. Okay, we had no consent agenda items. We are in the home stretch. Other announcements, we've already discussed the farm animal issue. Any other general announcements from our town administrator? Nope. None? Okay, Madam Clerk? No? Okay, Mr. Solicitor?
I will try to be as quick as possible with this. Item A, a special meeting and workshop regarding updating ordinances relative to comprehensive community plan. I've circulated a spreadsheet that you should each have in front of you on legal size paper. It should stand out. That is the first sort of summary of all of the action items that your new comprehensive plan requires. And so what we've done, the working group that we have now on this process, we've identified each of the items that the comp plan requires action on. That may be something like an ordinance change, it may be a resolution, it may be simply a policy decision that the town has to make. And we've summarized, I know it's hard to read, I apologize, the font came out quite small on this printout, and I'll try to circulate it electronically so you can have, zoom in on it if you want to look at it in detail. I don't want to go through it line by line, obviously. What I would like to do, however, is I wanted to give you that to give you a sense of the volume of work involved, and point out that at least in 20 of those line items, I will need to get guidance from the council on whether, if, and how you want to reform your ordinances to address the action items in your comprehensive plan. You may end up saying, we don't want to revise anything. You may want to make 20 revisions, but I need to know what that is, and I need to, myself and the other attorneys would like the opportunity to explain that. Also, perhaps bring in the planning and zoning folks. The zoning board is less, I think, willing to weigh in on a lot of the zoning changes because they are also the deciding body on those ordinances. But I think you can at least offer the opportunity for items that they are comfortable in weighing in on. I think the planning board has already expressed an interest in being a part of this conversation, and the public, I think, might have an interest. So my suggestion was to attempt to do this in a separate workshop. And I know that the calendar fills up quickly, but this is, in the end, something that's required under state law. And I think between now and December, we have to have a process that would get us through these decisions for you. Again, we have notes in here, and they're broken down by category within the comp plan, and then they're broken down by an individual action item. I don't want to go through these in detail, but if anyone has questions about particular sections after you have a chance to review this, please contact me. But what I would like to do is see if it's of interest to the council to have that sort of public session with some or all of you participating, and certainly the administration and the various boards who are impacted weighing in on the direction we take. And again, we are attempting to try to do as much of this compliance by year end in order to meet the state statute requirement.
In some cases, we have to change, right, to comply, to match with the comprehensive.
Well, if you want to match with the comprehensive plan, then you would require a change. I think you also have the option of modifying your comp plan if you decide that a specific ordinance change is not, something you're interested in. Then you could, piece by piece, go back and amend the comp plan so that your current ordinance is in compliance. It's the reverse way to do it. I don't know if you have any interest in that, but I just want to make sure you understand that that's an option.
So, may I have to admit, I saw this, first of all, I have some questions. I'm sorry, but I'm going to be really picky about this. On this team, who is Scott? I see, I see council
Can you tell me which
first.
number?
Yeah, I see council first draft, Fabish, Ciccione, and sometimes Scott. Who is Scott?
Jeannie Scott, who is the attorney that is working with us on this. The RFP for an attorney to support this went out. She was one of the two respondents, and so she has been providing that support.
Okay, and so So Jeannie Scott was chosen from that RFP list, because I know we went out to RFP on this.
Actually, I spoke with both of the attorneys who were responsive, and she was available and able to help with this part of the process. The other attorney, whose name is escaping me, from Sheckman, Halpern, and Savage, he has agreed to provide some support later on in the process as well, but that's...
Okay. So I have two comments.
Yeah, and Nancy makes a good point. Jeannie Scott actually was an assistant solicitor here
Right.
under Ursula and Tights, and then it's one of the reasons we viewed her as a very valuable addition to the process.
Right. But the first process that's supposed to happen in all this before we start running off trying to change all these ordinances is the way the comp plan is designed, there is a body that's assigned the primary responsibility to look at each of these items and to determine, to make a recommendation, first and foremost, do we go forward with this? Some of these are requirements. Many of them are not. The comp plan was specifically written that way. But that primary responsibility body, first and foremost, is supposed to advise the council, because they represent the town, as to whether or not, we're going forward with these, or what portions of these need to be addressed and what portions that they don't. This is, with all due respect, not a process for three attorneys to take over and start writing ordinances. I mean, that's not how it's supposed to work. The attorneys are supposed to be there at the point after these various boards and commissions have come back and said, yes, no, this is what we need help with, or this is, where we think we should go with this. Not that all of a sudden the attorneys take these over and start looking through these and deciding which ones to do and which ones not to do.
I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. That's why we list those various boards as the primary responsibility. That is listed there for a reason. It's because
right there.
we need that input from them, as you point out. I think what we're asking is that to start this process, we have a workshop and discuss with the option for those boards or their chairs or representatives or liaisons, whomever they choose, to have a public discussion about that. But I think in the end, that's a discussion that the council and those various bodies should have publicly and early on, so that we can all get a sense of where we're going and we don't end up sort of with a long, drawn-out back and forth. There are a lot of bodies who have different responsibilities here. Every department director, every board and commission that is involved in land use or planning or various uses in the town. And I think my recommendation is that we do this in a single workshop and send this around to each of them and say, look at the ones that you're responsible for, and then come to that workshop with suggestions. Language you feel is valuable, whatever that is, so that we have that input early on, and then the council can, after the workshop, proceed to making some of the decisions that the council has to make.
Is it realistic to cover this much content in one workshop? I think I just have to ask the question. There's a lot here. I mean, I almost feel like this is three.
It's not.
3 hours.
I think that may be the case.
Jan's raising his hand
but
over
I'm
here.
Just trying to think from scheduling.
I don't necessarily mean that we delve into each of one of these in great depth in that initial
Like a
workshop.
project kickoff is really what I think you're describing.
Exactly, right, because it would take 50 hours, and then you'd have everyone who only has an interest in one piece sitting for that whole 50 hours. But I think we have to start, because it is going to take a long time.
Let's call it a project kickoff, and that way we're not kind of clear that we're not covering it all one night and every.
But wouldn't you want to send it to all these boards that are the primary, and then have them send it back to us? So this workshop wouldn't be for a couple of months, I would assume.
Can I make a comment on that?
It's up to Rob.
Well, let me hear. Yeah, no, I didn't.
No, I'm done.
I don't think, and I agree that it shouldn't be three attorneys making the decisions. I don't think that's what's being proposed here at all. I have some experience with public process. It can take an awfully long time, especially if you go the way of like, let's send everything to everybody and then wait for everybody to send something back. Now you have to start integrating it. What helps is actually when you have someone or a few people who have some experience with, I mean, the issue is not writing the comp plan that was done. The issue is issues that were flagged that may require an ordinance change. Well, if that's the case, then I think it's helpful to have some, legally qualified people saying, this change, if it's to be translated into an ordinance, this is what it could look like, or here are your options. I think that expedites the process. It helps people focus much more quickly on what decision needs to be made, instead of having wide-ranging discussions in a wide range of boards and commissions. I think you just never get the job done if you do it that way.
And if I could just follow up on what Jan just said, I'm suggesting we provide notice. I mean, look, these boards and commissions should already know what the comp plan says about their board and commission. If they have interest in providing input, they can do that in writing prior to the workshop, the kickoff, and we can take that into account. There may be some items that we then have to go back and have conversations with those boards or commissions to understand exactly what they're requesting, so we can explain that to you in a detailed memorandum on each of these items. But in the end, I think what we'll end up doing is having that kickoff, having communications of some sort facilitated through Jan to the various...
Or the planning board.
Or the various bodies that have the responsibilities. And then coming back to you with detailed memoranda that state the opinions of the various interested parties and give you recommendations, either options or recommendations as to specific ordinance changes, and then maybe consider 3 of those per meeting for 10 meetings in a row. And I think that's what I'm trying to line up a schedule that gets us to December and having chipped away at a lot of this. Some will be easy, and there won't be a ton of input needed, and we can get those done in the summer. Some will require much more detail. There are some of these that are very, very detailed, and we may not get them done till December. But I think unless we have a kickoff, make a plan, start a process, then we're not really complying with the state law that requires us to run these traps.
I imagine if we slipped the deadline a little bit, as long as we had a plan in place,
I don't believe that would be, there would be no enforcement mechanism other than you run some legal risk of not having conformance if there's a dispute within a board with an applicant who uses that argument.
Really what I think, not just kick it right over here, really what this is a project. So this is a great start. I think we almost need like a project plan. It's these various milestones, and we think we're going to hit them.
So, a couple things about the comprehensive plan. The only thing that's binding in there at all is the future land use map. That's the only thing that has to be updated in 18 months. The rest of all this stuff, only if it's on the future land use map. And I think there's only one thing on our future land use map that already exists that we have to update. That's it. Everything else here does not fall under that 18-month requirement, because that's the only thing that matters. And so there's that. The thing that I'm worried about is, and I'm going to be honest, because Mr. Ciccione, you haven't done land use before, and Mr. Fabish was on a planning board once, but I am looking at some of these things. We're going to need, out of part of this funding, if we don't have an in-house planner, we're going to need some professional planning advice, because otherwise you're going to end up with a bunch of things that end up contradicting each other and overlapping each other. So somewhere out of this funding, if we don't have a planner, we are going to have to hire a planner to do this. And Jan is nodding, so...
I don't mean to interrupt Jan, but I just need to respond to this. I've heard you say now that I don't have land use experience a couple times tonight. I started out my career as a land use attorney for the largest industrial park in the state of Rhode Island. I've done real estate. I've represented some of the largest national developers in the world with their land use, zoning, and permitting. I've done that for now 23 years, every year, having done land use and zoning. My firm has done some of the most aggressive and important land use work all the way up to the state Supreme Court and on federal court. And so I just want to be very clear that we bring some of the best land use expertise in the state of Rhode Island to the table for the town of Tiverton.
Thank you.
So let me suggest this, and being mindful, this is kind of on the other items section, and we're half an hour past our deadline.
Before we do that, could Jan respond? He started to say something.
I'll be quick. Just, it's interesting that the planner was mentioned, because I agree that if you have a good planner, that's an essential resource in this project, process, whatever. We have actually talked with a candidate who has done this specific type of work in another community. And I've talked with Sue about, whether he's the right candidate or not, but one thing to do is actually try it out with him working on something like this, which I think could be very helpful, because it's actually, he's done it in Middletown. Exact same situation. You have a comprehensive plan. Now you need to come up with your implementation strategy, including, to the extent necessary, a legal implementation. So that may well work. I do believe that would be very helpful to have that as part of this strategy.
So this is a very complex project. It's a project manager. I'm not sure who's the project manager. And what I would suggest is, for our next meeting, which is July 8th, maybe we come back with sort of a project plan, and that allows everybody to digest this document. And then I see that we did an RFP on this, and there are other lawyers that are involved as well. Someone's got to manage lawyers. So, maybe you're the project manager, and I don't know, maybe it's, I have to be respectful of his time. Maybe the new planner, I don't know, but we need a project plan, right?
I
Do we
think
agree on that at
Plan,
least?
yeah.
Yeah, we're happy, I'm happy to work with Jan to outline what we've discussed and what's behind this document in terms of thinking. I think what I was hoping to do tonight was simply to get a sense of timing for that initial session, so that we can build that plan and actually give you an achievable set of goals. And if August is the first opportunity, or September is the first opportunity, then so be it. We can build something around that. I assume it's not going to be any sooner than that. But I know that you've been very diligent about trying to schedule town council business out months, and I think this becomes a big piece that I don't want to let slip by.
May I ask one other question about this in terms of primary responsibility? Where did the assignments for primary responsibility come from?
I believe in part these are coming out of the comprehensive plan and the action items. Much of this is just transcribed from the comp plan.
Okay. I'm just a little thrown by some of these
But, and that's exactly why
assignments.
this is how the process should go. We've got somebody that put a lot of work into a draft document. Everybody take it home, review it, study it, kick the tires on it. Let's bring it back in 2 weeks. And what I think I heard from you is you need some sense of priorities so that we know what it would take to hit a December deadline, which I assume we all want to hit, even if we don't.
And I'm not sure that, that it's a lot to even look at this to come up with priorities. I mean, I'm not sure that I would have a great expectation that we would have priorities in 2 weeks, but if there are priorities, please let me know. And if there's more information or more citations or formatting changes to this type of document that will make it more helpful in your analysis, please let me know and we can do that. But I at least wanted to start with something in front of you to give you a sense of what we're up against, what you're up against.
And we can make a decision too, if we only want to hit the bare minimum by December 31st, if we want to spread it out into 2 years. I think that we should probably have a point of view on pretty soon.
I mean, we can do the ordinance map adoption next month if you want to, right? And that's Councilor Hilton is correct. That is the one clear and concise requirement. I do still believe you have an obligation to comply your comprehensive to comport your comprehensive plan and your ordinance in more detail, and I think that's why we have to consider this. And Jan makes a great point that as a town you need to, right? You are not giving your applicants for land use and zoning good guidance if you have a ordinance that conflicts with your comprehensive plan. It is creating confusion. It can create legal issues, and it is not something you wanted to leave in place for any longer than you need to, because you run the risk of either one litigation or two applications going through in conflict with your ordinance.
All right, well, this is a very lengthy document in 6-point font. Thank you for...
I'll work on the font first.
It's, thanks for putting something out there that we can kick the tires on. Okay, we've got a claim, a new claim that's come to, we're on official notice of. This is common to put the municipality on notice, correct?
Yeah, Nancy reminded me that these are probably good to just make similar to the correspondence received. There's no action required on this. It is simply a notice. You have a copy of the claim from Thomas E. Sparks, attorney at law, relative to an incident involving Mr. J. Wright. We will refer this off to the interlocal trust, and assuming they provide their coverage as they typically would, we will simply add it to the litigation memorandum and move from there. The last item...
Mr. President, before you go there, just so people know, I have a request of the Ethics Commission related to an advisory opinion on this next issue, and in an abundance of caution, I'm going to recuse from this matter.
Okay.
Okay, and that would be an update on Harrop v. Rhode Island Division of Lotteries. It's a state civil action 19-5273, and we have a recusal. Over to you.
So this will be very brief. Again, I believe it'll be brief. We do not, I expected by earlier today, and I can check again right now, but I had expected by earlier today that we would have a, well, I guess we do have it technically. At 9:58, we received the memo that was e-filed. So the process in this case is that the plaintiffs needed to file a memorandum, and then the defendants, of which we are one, have an opportunity by July 29th, I believe it is, to respond. That memorandum was supposed to be filed today. It was filed 30 minutes ago, give or take. So I have not had a chance, obviously, to review it, and so I don't really have much to offer on this matter other than having circulated an article that I caught in the Providence Business News for your reading pleasure, which I thought just gave a interesting perspective on the case. It's nothing earth-shattering in there, but I wanted to make sure that at least you all saw the generic background even before we can provide any legal briefing. To that end, I will include this in the litigation memo, which I had held off on delivering today because I wanted to include this in it. I'll be able to read this in the morning and then deliver that memo to you electronically for the month soon after. But that was my executive session item, which I would ask that we defer since I don't have that to produce today.
When is our, so just by way of reminder, this is a case we did not ask to be in, but the judge ordered us to at least be a formal party.
Yeah.
And I think there's some discussion that will eventually, we do want public input on is, do we have a position, A, and B, do we want to expend town resources advocating for that position? And when is our deadline to be responsive to the next court?
So July 29th is the, actually, I take that back. We have, and when I say defendants, we're really indispensable third parties. The plaintiffs are, Dr. Harrop and his lawyers are the plaintiffs. We are, I guess we're not sure if we're a defendant, right? I mean, we don't know what position we're taking. We don't know if we're going to agree with some or all of the positions of either the plaintiffs or the other defendants. In fact, the judge has simply asked us to file an answer, which would be a pro forma response, I assume, within about 20 days. So we have till mid to late July to file an answer of some sort, and obviously we'll need some input on that. I need to read their brief in order to make a recommendation. So
we could amend the answer if we really want.
And we can amend the answer, and the judge will be, I'm sure, more than accommodating on that. And then we have till July 29th to reply to the memorandum that was just produced.
Now that would take a lot of work.
Well, yes or no. It depends on what your response is. And I can tell you that the town of Lincoln just made a decision in their council that there was an offer from the casino side to provide the lawyers that would I guess, act in the capacity of defendants for the town. The town of Lincoln rejected that offer because they are concerned that there's an inherent conflict of interest since they are the licensing board, as you just experienced tonight, for the co-defendants. And So perhaps there is a conflict of interest in having them foot the bill for your legal defense. Also, as we mentioned in the last meeting, I think there's a question about what's in the best interest of the town. Is it, if we feel that the plaintiffs are correct and there should have been a vote, then perhaps the best answer is to simply put it to a vote as quickly as possible and get some agreement that the gambling will not be interrupted either by injunction or otherwise by the plaintiffs until such time as the vote can happen. That might be an option. In fact, we're meeting with plaintiff attorneys tomorrow to try to get a sense of what exactly they're looking for, and I'll include that in the report as well. So I think we don't know. We really don't know right now. I don't know what to advise you. I don't know what the arguments in the case are, but we will have to answer that probably about 2 or 3 weeks from now with some authority.
Okay, so what I think has to happen here, and this is a request for public input, I think on July 8th, we need to have I don't know if we'll call it a public hearing, but it'll be a public forum. We need feedback from the town on whether we should have a point of view on this. There's a lawsuit out there that says that the voters should have had the chance to vote on sports betting. And that the vote that we had in this town by close margin approved having a casino is an allegation in a lawsuit that there needed to be a vote specific to sports betting. We could agree with that position and say we agree, or we could agree with the casino saying that the vote is not needed, or we could stay neutral but then schedule our own vote, and maybe there's some other options. I think we also need guidance from you on whether we want to even expend town resources in this dispute, which we did not ask to be in, but a judge has dragged us into as an indispensable party to the case. But that doesn't mean that we're going to rack up a huge bill advocating. So I think that's something that please give some thought to, and please be ready to give us feedback on July 8th, and that would give you time to prepare a memo if we need to. Okay? It's a tough
There's
question.
financial interest in.
Well, Jan has another point to make, which I think is important, but let me also just add, I don't think I answered your prior question. One of the options will hopefully be, rather than for us to expend time and hours and money writing our own briefs, would be to simply say, we agree with plaintiffs on X, we agree with defendants on Y, and simply send a one-liner into the judge stating our position, and that would be legitimate and the least expensive path.
Right, so if we decide to take a position, then the secondary option may be to state our position and then try to do as little work as possible, riding on the coattails of others, which I may well be where we end up.
I just want to remind ourselves that we're in a somewhat awkward position here in that the town has a financial interest in the sports betting because we're supposedly getting $100,000 per year as a result of that. I don't know how that influences what we do or don't do in this particular case, but I think it needs to be considered.
Absolutely does.
I can tell you simply from the your legal decision has to be your legal decision, and that's fine. But I think certainly given the relationship that seems to be very strong with your tenant casino, I am very sensitive to that in my interactions with both Mark and the other attorneys that are representing those interests, and they understand the position Lincoln is in. They understand the position Tiverton is in. We're certainly not trying to poke the bear in any sense, and I think actually, Mr. President, I've mentioned to attorneys for the casino folks that they get the great benefit of hearing these debates in public session, and that is helpful because now they know exactly what's going on in the town. So I've encouraged them to watch the videos and such when these issues come up, and they are very thankful that they have the opportunity to know exactly where we are.
All right, this is a tough one, so please give it some thought and let us know what you think.
I just noticed something funny on the the complaint. It says responsible party, town of Tiverton, Rhode Island, jointly and severely.
Oh, I'm sorry, so the prior matter, yes.
Okay, floor is open. Any town councilors with any announcements or general items?
I do. I just wanted to give an update on the employee contract, employee conduct ordinance. It's still a work in progress. I met with the town administrator, solicitor Nancy, and myself, just to look at the language and to see what was going on with that. And there was it was problematic for some, the way to go forward with what the where we wanted to end up with. And Gio was supposed to get back to us with some of the recommendations and some of the language that he needed to look at. He also needed to look at what it says about state pensions or other pensions, and so it get a little bit complicated. So that's probably what you kind of saw with some phone calls I had to do. And
I'm not reading the rules.
I just, that's the only reason I call, has to do with stuff. So, anyway, we will have another, Gio's supposed to get back to me and tell me when he has the language ready for us to look at it again. I just don't want to waste the council's time, until we have something good to look at, okay? All right, thank you.
Just a reminder that the Grinnell's Beach thank you ceremony is Thursday, the 27th at 1 o'clock at Grinnell's Beach, and all of the donors and contributors have been invited. Be a short ceremony, probably only about 25 minutes, but of course everyone's welcome to attend.
Rob, I'd like to say something. I don't know if anyone's been down there, but the project is better than I ever anticipated. And since I've been here from the beginning of it, I want to thank Trish Hilton and Brett Pelletier, because without their leadership and their insistence that this gets done, it would never have been completed. And the amount of work they've both put into this is unbelievable. So I'd like to say thank you from all of Tiverton to Trish and Brett.
Very good.
Fantastic job.
We had lots of help, so.
Yes, but.
I was just there yesterday.
You were the horse that led the cart.
Yeah, but you were the bossy person.
She was the horse that led the cart.
Okay, anything else?
Sure.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to ask Councilor Hilton if she wanted to apologize to the solicitor for impugning his land use experience.
No, actually, Mr. Ciccione and I can agree to disagree on this. This is part of the reason why, would I have preferred to have made some of my feelings in executive session? Yes, we didn't want to do that, which put me in this position. We can agree to disagree. I think Mr. Ciccione has more real estate experience than land use experience. I can only say what I've observed. And, as the liaison to both the planning board and to the zoning board, what I've heard from various members and what I've seen in our discussions. So, if we want to have things in open session, then we have to accept the fact that people are going to, make forthright comments. It's my right as a counselor to express my opinion. And again, we can agree to disagree on this.
So on the executive session piece, I believe that item 2 has been resolved, or at least voted on. Item 3, I understand the sponsor is withdrawing, at least for tonight's meeting, is that correct? And item 1, I think we can take that as either by paper form only or set it for future meetings. So I propose we do not have an executive session and we immediately go to adjournment. Is there any objection?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Okay. All those in favor? All right. Good night, everybody.